meeting open and welcome you to this month's meeting of Council. The recording of this Council meeting will be available to the public on Council's website for a period of 6 months. In accordance with Council's policy, I will now ask staff to confirm that the recording has commenced.
Yes, it has, Mayor.
Thank you. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the South East Nation, the Malacadee people of the Yuin River and the Lilliquanni people of Far South. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We recognise that we have much to learn from Aboriginal people today who represent the world's oldest continued living culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. In attendance tonight, we have Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Jessup, Councillor Temby, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Camber-Smith and Councillor Burgess. Would you like to introduce your staff, please?
Yes, thanks you, Mayor. We've got the Director of Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development, Matthew Grimsey, the Director of People and Corporate Services, David Spinks, Acting Director Community Wellbeing Services, Lyle Ground, and Media and Communications Coordinator, Kelly Davis, and Executive Assistant, Sandy Rustel.
Thank you. We have no apologies. We have one leave of absence from Councillor O'Neill. Excuse me. We have no absence. Councillors, do we have and wish to declare any declare interest?
Yes, Mayor. I'm declaring a interest in agenda item 19.026-23.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes 4.005/23. Do I have a councillor to move the minutes are confirmed for the ordinary meeting of Council Wednesday the 26th of April 2023? Yes, Councillor Jessup, and a seconder, Councillor Burgess. Do any councillors wish to report any changes? Well, I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors, and the motion is carried. General Manager, are there any legislative items?
No, Mayor.
Any urgent matters?
No, Mayor.
Okay. I just have a couple of announcements to make. The breast screening, Tasmanian screening unit, seen 128 women in Dover, and 18 of those were first-time users, and 721 in Yuinville, and 48 were first time. So they was really pleased with those results. We also had the community awards on the weekend. Deputy Mayor Thorpe officiated that for me because I was away, but I'd just like to congratulate all the winners. They're on our site and again in the Yuin News, I believe, and yeah, so well done to all involved. Just a little bit of news that is a little bit disheartening, but over at our bus depot here, at where Tassie Link is, we had a brand new interactive bus timetable schedule. It was put in vandal-proof everything, and it has been vandalised. It's been burnt and broken. So that's really disheartening. I think that we just need to report things when we see things happening around the place. So, okay, then we go on to the questions that we had. Yep, they're all been answered and responses, and the answers are on our webpage. Okay. Then we have questions without notice, and 3 were received from Mr. Jeffrey Swan, Mrs. Irene Swan regarding the LPS process, and Ms. Jo Goodman concerning the Telstra towers. And as we've said before, those answers are on our website as well. So, from the gallery, public question time. I think we all know the drill now. If you'd like to ask a question, put up your hand and we'll go from there. Yes, Jen, would you like to come forward and just state your name and where you're from, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Jen Hadaway, Dover. I'd just like to say thank you very much to all of you for finally getting the works started for the Dover Medical Centre. I can tell you that there are great sighs of relief running around our community at the moment. I have a question. Do you have an approximate completion date, please?
Yes, through you, General Manager, I'll pass that over to the Acting Director.
Yes, we do. At this stage, it's the end of November.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the gallery? Yes.
Hello, Caleb from Dover. My first question is, attachment 16.009 fees and charges for 2023-24 present a number of increases. Of particular interest are those relating to planning and development. Many of these fees are seeing a proposed increase of around 144%, so a DA permitted for a residential dwelling is to go from $412 to $1,006, and for discretionary $721 to $1,760. So my question is, what has reduced the efficiency of the planning department's de-assessment, and when did that happen?
Thank you, Caleb. Can I pass that through to yourself and then on to the Director? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, there has been no reduction in the planning area's efficiency. What Council has identified is that planning, which is based upon applications, so it's effectively a user pays process, is not reflective of user pays. So the general ratepayer is substantially subsidising the planning area and assessment of applications. So Council's identified them to increase fees to reflect user pays.
Okay. All right, do I have any other questions from... Yes, you come forward. Thank you.
Hi, Shane Johnson from Franklin. My question through you, Mayor, is to the General Manager. Council did not consider the merits of my representation to the local provision schedule, which sought, amongst other things, to have a large portion of our land rezoned to rural living. It stated that a fresh structure plan for Franklin following a strategic review was required. The Planning Authority at the LPS hearings asked that our representation not be considered because the land use study was imminent. In your response to Councillor Jessop's motion, you have stated that rural living is beyond the scope of the land use study. When will our submission be considered by the Planning Authority, and hasn't the TPC panel been misled?
Thank you. Thanks for that, Shane. I'll pass that through to you, through to the Director.
Through you, Mayor, the answer, the information that's been provided to Councillor Jessop's motion is that the Council does not have a specific study associated with rural living whereby every landowner will be consulted and contacted. We are going through the process of a land use development strategy. Rural living will be coming up, obviously, as part of that process in general terms, and we certainly encourage people to make submissions in regard to that.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the gallery? Yes, Amy?
Amy Robertson of Port Huon. From an accountability point of view, what systems, KPIs, job management, controls, training, benchmarking, etc., are in place to control efficient increases or control efficiency in increases in DA or planning related costs?
Okay, thank you. Do I take that one?
I think I'll take that on notice just to give it full consideration. And there's a fair bit there in a sense of KPIs. I wouldn't be able to name them off the top of my head, but we do have indicators there. So can I take that on notice, Amy, and come back to you?
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the gallery? Yep, you can go again, Amy.
That sounds ominous. Here we go again.
Wasn't meant that way.
So also on the point of view of accountability around planning costs. I had a look at the last 6 months of your workflow data for planning, and I recall an analysis not long ago where we looked at the last 10 years and a step up in the shift to discretionary applications around 2015 when the interim scheme came through. I can't see any indications in your workflow over the last 6 months that there's been a huge hike in planning applications. But I do notice from your budget reporting that there's an underspend currently of several $100,000 in your planning department's budget. That's the development services line under governance strategy and sustainable development, which was $332 odd thousand, yet to, well, below budget spend to date. So,
Okay.
any rationale for
that? Yep.
given the need to fund it better?
Okay, thanks, Amy. Pass that through to you.
I'll pass that back on to the director, but I suspect it's to do with our work around the strategy work. So we allocated to that particular team to work through the vision, our LUDs and the like, and all of that activity you would see budgeted for in that cost centre. So that's why you would start to see that. And if it's related to the first question, that's probably an easier one to answer more directly. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that? Yeah.
Okay, yes. Shane.
So this is just a follow-up to my previous question to Matt. At the panel's hearing, it was suggested that a strategic review for Franklin wouldn't occur within a minimum of 2 to 3 years. Is that your expectation for the rural living component of a strategic review to take place?
Okay, thank you, Shane. Through to you, Director.
There isn't currently scheduled a full strategic review of rural living. Certainly, one of the guiding documents that we do have to deal with is the Southern Tasmanian Rural Land Use Strategy, and that strategy certainly has a strong limitation on the creation of new rural living land. The best process would be to be making submissions towards that once the review starts in the next financial year.
Do I have any other questions from the gallery? Okay, I'll move on then. Thank you, guys. 8.2, deputations. Are there any deputations?
No, Mayor.
Petitions?
No, Mayor.
Okay, I now advise that the Council is acting as a planning authority as at
6:13.
in accordance with the provisions of Part 2, Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 2015, the Council will now act as a planning authority pursuant to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect of those matters appearing under Item 10 on this agenda, inclusive of any supplementary items. Agenda number 10.001/23, Planning Application DA 210/2022, Tourist Operation comprising art installation, visitor centre cafe and information centre, walking track, car parks, services, workshop and amenities at Ida Bay Railway 328 Loon River Road, Ida Bay. CT 238040/1, and for infrastructure works on part of 308 Loon River Road, CT 245028/1, Ida Bay, and within the road reservation of Loon River Road, Ida Bay, and part of Edwards Road, Ida Bay, PID 3391561. I refer councillors to the amended recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Yes, Councillor Temby. And a seconder, Councillor Burgess.
What's she moving first?
The amended.
Yes, I'd like to move the motion, but
Yes.
I'd like to have a minor amendment to the condition, please.
Okay, yes.
Condition 4E. So it's with regards to Phytophthora. The potential risk for the flora and fauna habitat of the area is high. If we don't take good care of the risk involved, there is a known Phytophthora incident 1.5 kilometres in Southport Lagoon Track, and no symptomatic evidence of Phytophthora was observed within the site, but Wet Heath community is particularly susceptible to its impacts. So therefore I request that 4E be changed to point number 3, appropriate methods to manage, mitigate and where possible prevent the spread of weeds and soil-based pathogens to and from the property, and in addition to install several permanent wash stations and direct all visitors and workers to wash stations every time they enter.
Okay, thank you.
Just confirm the seconder accepts it.
Do you accept those, that change on as a seconder?
Can I ask a question before I do?
Yes.
Doesn't appropriate methods of manage and mitigate cover that?
And so what's happened with the, I'll just answer that, Mayor.
Yep.
So that's, it's mainly concentrating on the actual operation itself, the construction, and I'm wanting to stipulate that you will need to have a number of wash stations for the actual ongoing work, but the actual operation and when it's functioning as a tourist venue as well, and to direct all visitors and workers to the wash station.
Okay, Councillor Burgess.
I don't think that we need to get into that nitty-gritty of knowing exactly how to do it. I believe that the appropriate methods to manage and mitigate and where possible prevent. Oh, did I turn it off? I don't think it's necessary to get in the nitty-gritty of micromanaging. I believe the appropriate methods to manage, mitigate and where possible prevent cover that. I think that's all we need to do. So I won't second that amendment.
Okay, so do I have someone else to second that motion, please? Yes, Councillor Jessup. Okay, Councillor Temby, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So under the Biodiversity Code E10, as the proposal does not meet any acceptable solutions under E10.7.1A1, it must meet the performance criteria to moderate priority biodiversity values to minimise impacts. And as I said, this soil pathogen could actually create a serious problem. So I'm just trying to highlight that it presents a risk, a long-term risk to the viability and subsequent
actual tourist attraction itself. So infrastructure mechanisms to direct visitors to a shoe wash station before visitors enter the area. Several may be needed depending on the number of visitors expected, and signage to stay on the path entering environmentally sensitive habitat would be advisable.
Thank you. Yes, councillor?
Sorry, Mayor, through you, Mayor. Can I just ask a question?
You may.
Yes, just a quick question to Councillor Temby. What would be the practicality of that process when people have rocked up in their sand shoes? You'd need gumboots to be walking through things to wash your feet before you walked into a building, I would expect.
Can I answer that, Mayor?
Yes,
Thank
you may.
So it's not actually wetting the all of the shoes. It's a known practice for any national park that you enter, or any area that has the potential risk for the pathogen. It's just a brush, and it brushes like a disinfectant on the sole of your shoe, and so it's just a simple process that wouldn't hurt your shoes, basically. Yeah.
But it wouldn't be 100% effective either, because basically you're just cleaning the bottom of your shoes. So the possibility would still be there that you could still potentially trudge it through.
I think it just minimises the risk.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have any other questions? Yes, councillor Campbell-Smith.
I raised a number of questions, and I think it's worthwhile just walking through those for the benefit of the gallery and people listening as well, just to, I think, alleviate the various concerns that have been raised in some extremely well worded submissions that we've had, and very well researched submissions that we've had on this particular proposal. Some of them I'm satisfied now have been picked up in our conditions, which again I congratulate our planners on this very comprehensive list of conditions, which I think is fantastic, given this is a very sensitive area and quite unique. So one of the first points I raised was about the chance finding of either Aboriginal or post-colonisation artefacts and what should happen, and I understand that has an advice clause will be added to the permit to cover that, because it is in fact outside the power of the planning scheme, so that's covered that particular issue. I also raised the issue of nighttime illumination. Now, while we've said that the actual attraction can only be open during daylight hours, I suspect there will be some form of illumination throughout the night as well, just for security reasons. And I think it's as well that we, just for in a sort of abundance of caution, that we make reference to the Aussie standard, which provides guidelines for nighttime illumination to minimise threats to nocturnal fauna and is in line with dark sky concepts. But that's something that presumably the people who've put forward the motion would need to accept, would they? Or should I step through my various options? Or
Through you, Mayor. Under condition 4B, the mitigation of any identified impacts from illumination from approved facilities and structures on nocturnal fauna is to include appropriate measures for. So that is actually included within the permit.
okay, so we do actually mention. We don't mention 428.2.2019, do we?
We don't mention the standard. The standard's not mentioned in the scheme.
Okay. But that's implicit, presumably, in that advice.
Through you, Mayor, I'll also refer you to the submission from the applicant, is that no night activity is proposed. As such, nothing will be illuminated other than baffled security lighting. The reserve activity assessment process examined this issue and determined there was minimal impact Please note there is an existing tourism operation on the site which will be responsible for its own lighting.
Okay. The other one that I was particularly concerned about was the wastewater evaporation and irrigation zone, subsurface irrigation, which has been sort of squeezed in between the car park and the railway line. I understand that E23 actually does provide this 6 metre setback, but wondering if that is actually suitable, given that volunteers will need to work in that area on the railway line, and whether we shouldn't request that irrigation area be moved to a different, more suitable site.
Are you happy that to come through?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. The on-site wastewater management system has been and will be designed by a suitably qualified professional, so it will be designed to meet the standards. Condition 4.1 includes the requirement for the on-site wastewater management and irrigation area to include minimum setbacks from existing car parking infrastructure and other railway infrastructure. The condition is appropriate and any plans will be reviewed by both the Development Engineering Officer and Environmental Health Officer once submitted.
But the actual drawing they've provided shows that whole area being infilled with that irrigation area.
Which the condition is there to bring it back at least 6 metres.
Okay. I probably won't be able to fit in there 500 metres squared in that area now. Okay. I guess the only other one that's left, given that we've covered nearly everything else, is the helicopter landing site, and whether that could be restricted to emergency use only, in case there's a sort of a creep of usage there with helicoptering in, VIPs, etc.
I don't believe there's any provision under the planning scheme to make such a restriction.
So any tourist operation could just have helicopters coming in and out? There must be some...
But potentially, if it's an approved aeronautical location.
Really?
The planning scheme doesn't define and determine who can actually use that helipad.
Could we put in a advice clause to that end, that we would, as a planning authority, given the threatened fauna in the area, particularly swift parrots and the risk of collisions, that we include an advice clause that we suggest that the helicopter landing site only be restricted to emergency use?
You can provide an advice clause, but it won't be any effect.
No, but it would helpful, I think.
Well, that's if everyone else agrees with it, Jenny. Yeah. Okay, so that's, I'd say that's probably your time taken up on your bits. So did you want to do anything with that, or you're leaving it the way they are, or?
I definitely want to add in the advice clause about the helicopter.
And what would your wording be?
Advice clause is helicopter landing site to be restricted to emergency use only.
Okay, I then ask the mover. Is that an amendment?
Through you, Mayor, it would be an amendment. The only difficulty I have is that to put an advice clause that it is restricted to when it is unenforceable is probably not appropriate.
We request that it be limited to.
Well, would you like to put that motion? Are you putting a motion?
Yes.
Amended motion through?
Yes,
okay.
Please.
Is there a seconder for? Oh, sorry. Is there a seconder for Jenny's amended motion?
Yeah. I'll
yes.
Second that.
Okay. Paul, thank you. Yes, would you like to speak more on that, Jenny?
No, I think I've said my piece.
All right. So, can we have clarity of that wording again, please?
We request that the proponents seriously consider that the helicopter landing site be restricted
to use by emergency personnel only, or in emergency situations only.
Okay. Well, is there anyone else that wants to speak to that, or will I just? Yeah, you can ask a question.
Through you, Mayor. So I'm sitting here wondering how this actually goes, because I'm not really into helipads and I'm not quite sure how they actually function. I mean, I know how a helipad functions, but this helipad will be funded by whom? Who is paying for the helipad?
The applicants.
So he will be the owner of the helipad?
I assume so.
And the helicopter that's going to land on the helipad?
It's not mentioned in the application, it's just
so it'll be a form of
drawings.
transport, much like the boat is that he brings from the wharf to...
Presumably.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how
What's
can
the
we
danger?
tell somebody that they're not allowed to use their helipad with their helicopter when it's not actually a planning derivative?
Well, if that's the case, I'll be voting against the motion.
Well, we can't though, Jen. Like, we have to vote against what we're told,
Yeah.
and we can't control someone's ability to use their own infrastructure, realistically,
Well,
how
we-
they choose to.
We do that all the time as a planning authority. But
Thank you, Mayor.
Can I just ask a
Councillor
question?
Gibson,
Through
yes.
you, Mayor. We're approving the use of this land for this purpose. Does that, can we not, we're sort of limiting the use of it as a cafe and an art piece. How does the, running joy flights out of that place would be a completely different thing. So that would require approval,
That's
separate approval.
certainly not part of the application.
No, that's right.
The application is associated
So
with the tourist operation.
the use that I guess that we're referring to is transport. Is that Jenny? Is that what you're concerned
general
about?
transport, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Which is
In an area where, in an extremely endangered bird is often nesting and foraging.
Yes, Councillor Temby.
I can understand Councillor Camper-Smith's concerns. I thought that there was reference to the helicopter usage within the 434-page document. Yeah, and I think it was considered within that document. I seem to remember reading it.
I searched on helicopter and couldn't find it anywhere, but
I
I could have missed it, yeah.
Okay then. Any other? I'll put all those in favour of the amendment to the motion. Please raise your hand. That's Councillor Temby, Councillor Camber-Smith and Councillor Gibson. All those in opposed, please raise your hand. That's Doyle, Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup and Burgess. So we go back to the original amended motion. And now that you've spoken, is there any other questions for that? Yes, Councillor Gibson?
Well, I'd just like to speak generally about this proposal.
Yep.
And although not a planning issue, I am very proud of the leadership of Huron Valley Council in steering Transformer to the current proposal. I'm also very grateful to Dark Lab for listening to the community concerns around the future of the railway and for changing their parking and entry layouts so that Ida Bay Railway Preservation Society and Transformer can coexist on the site. I wish the new artwork and the railway all the best for the future and sincerely hope that, despite the enormous difference in funding and approach, that these two organisations can coexist respectfully side by side into the future. In the planning terms, I have 4 points which I'd like to address. I would like to make a request to Dark Lab that the tennis court be recognised in some way as part of the story of living and working in the remote location, which is, that's the heritage nature of the Ida Bay Railway, which is very unusual and quite special, I think. So I'd like to make an amendment to request that Dark Lab acknowledge the tennis court, or if possible, retain it as part of the car park. I think that given that the forecourt of Mona is a tennis court, this could be a nice synchronicity and a win-win situation. I'd like in 3B to remove the word heritage, because it says prior to the commencement on the property of any heritage works, the permit holder must provide evidence to the Heritage Council, but it's not actually a heritage works that they're working on, it's just works. So if nobody objects to heritage being removed, I'd like to remove that. There was some changes which I don't know the gallery's aware of, but there was a couple of misconnected points in 3C that actually were meant to refer not to 1A and B, but refer to 3A and B, which now makes sense and refers the permit back to the heritage recommendations, which I think is good. In point 9, the intention of the opening hours being daylight hours is to minimise roadkill, but I think that the effect will be, in fact, to funnel traffic into the worst time of day for animals. So I think we should condition the approval to an hour before sunset rather than to going to sunset, if we actually want to achieve reducing roadkill, which the other option is to do a lot of educational signage, and I mean, locals know about roadkill and dusk and dawn, but I don't think visitors to Ida Bay would really understand that. So, I mean, limiting them to... And they're not going to want to run over wallabies either. It's actually very upsetting. So, a lot of educational and signage telling people to, really go slow at that time of day could be useful. And the last point is around keeping people safe from the railway, and I'm not in favour of fences, but I think it should be recognised that Transformer will be bringing a lot of people, including young kids, into this area, and there's trains moving around, and we just need to have that sort of safety managed by the proponent. So they're the 4 things I would like to amend.
Okay.
I can go back through
I'll
those.
go through to the Director.
Through you, Mayor, can I just clarify you're seeking an extra condition in relation to fencing? And if so, I need the wording for it.
I guess it is Dark Lab, the proponent, ensures this that there's some safety barrier to deter their patrons, especially children, from accessing the railway tracks.
Is that sufficient, Director?
Apologies there for my typing. So, Mayor, that would be a condition 15.
Yeah. And I guess just with regard to Councillor Temby's amendment, I'm an avid bushwalker and I wash my boots every time I go from one area to another, but my understanding of Whatuwhara is that it is about limiting the transfer as you move from one area to another. I think that the public in Transformer will be pretty much sticking to one track, and I think that a foot wash system is going to be very difficult to manage and probably not achieve anything. So I would tend to agree with Councillor Burgess that it should be mentioned, but maybe not prescribed as to how that's done.
Okay. Do we read out those for Councillor Temby to be able to see whether she accepts those, or is it become an... Yep. We'll just treat it as an amendment.
Okay,
All right?
no worries.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Yes. Councillor Camber-Smith?
Do we want to do it all as one thing, or shall I split it? Take. No, fine, leave it as it is. It's easier, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
We'll just go through them quickly. 1, acknowledging the tennis court.
Through you, Mayor, 1 was removing the word heritage from 3B.
Yes, yes, okay, you're right.
Yes, Mayor.
Yes.
Is that actually
Do I
an
have a
amendment?
seconder? Wait a minute. Do I have a seconder to removing the word heritage? Yes, Councillor Camber-Smith. Okay, do we just go to the motion, an amended motion? All those in favour, please raise your hand. Put your hands up, guys, the ones that... Yep,
It just
Councillor...
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. It's
It doesn't
not-
make sense. It's
I think
not heritage
It's a
work.
mistake.
It's a
I think
mistake.
It's a mistake in the permit conditions.
Yes?
Yeah, your next motion is going to be to get some heritage coverage on the tennis court, so wouldn't you leave the tennis court in there, especially if it was going to be incorporated into the car park maybe?
I think we probably should just treat them as separate. The tennis court is recognition of that, the Ida Bay Railway Village, and the fact that there was, a whole life going on there. Whereas the word heritage, it's just a mistake.
Yep, let's go a moment.
So, through you, Mayor, with respect to the tennis court, that would not be forming a condition of the permit. That would be a paragraph C. Council requests Arklab to acknowledge the tennis court in the heritage of the site or to retain it as part of the car park.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. 3B.
So,
Through you, Mayor, if it helps, there's no issues with removal of the word heritage from that as suggested.
Okay.
It would just clarify that is works that require heritage approval.
all right. So we won't need that one. So that the motion, the first amended motion is for the tennis court. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. And Councillor Camber-Smith, are you seconding that one for the tennis court?
If I can just ask a point of clarification, if it came to a choice between taking down some more trees or recognising the car park, the tennis court, then I would prefer to not recognise the tennis court. But if both things can be incorporated, then I'm happy with that.
I don't
Councillor
think
Gibson would like to.
it doesn't change the situation with the trees
Okay.
at all.
So do you?
Yes,
Yes,
I
okay.
second it, yes.
Let's go to the vote on that then. The amended motion 4, can I have the wording, please?
Through you, Mayor, the amendment is paragraph A as it is, B as it is, C is to be included. Council requests Arklab to acknowledge the tennis court in the heritage of the site or to retain it as part of the car park.
Number 1, what number?
3C?
Through you, Mayor, it would be a new paragraph C to the whole.
To which point?
Yes, at the end.
Oh.
So you currently have A and B.
Different action. It's a different action, so it would be separate.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After 14 until 15 goes in.
We're not keeping up here.
Okay, so we'll go to the vote on that then. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
I'm swinging.
That's Councillor Burgess, Camber-Smith, Gibson, Doyle, Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup and Temby. So that's has been... So now,
The daylight hours,
yes,
Just
So how would, yep,
well, as I said, I think the intention is to minimise roadkill, so maybe we should put it as two options, to close an hour before sunset, or to provide educational signage to alert people to the issue and advise speed limit of 40 kilometres an hour at the end of the day.
okay, do I have a seconder
visitors.
for that motion, amended motion? Councillor Camber-Smith. Yes, the wording will be intention.
Did you want the intention, or just can we condition the approval to closing an hour before sunset, or provide educational signage to alert people to the issue of animals and roadkill, and advise to drive slowly, and I won't be prescriptive at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. I think, yes, Councillor Jessup.
And this is related to point 9. This is related to point 9, so I thought I'd stay. Is there a reason why we're asking them to not be open on public holidays?
That's been amended.
We need to keep up, Mark.
Right. So I'm glad we could agree on that one. Thank you very much.
You know, I pointed that out and it was a mistake, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to read out what you have there, Director, please?
Through you, Mayor, it would be condition 9, hours of operation, except for office and administrative tasks. Hours of operation associated with the tourist operation of the property must be within daylight hours, in brackets, to close 1 hour before sunset, or provide educational signage to alert people to the issue of animals and roadkill, close brackets, during the following, and then goes on to Monday to Saturday, Sundays and Christmas Day.
Thank you. I would be happy with the educational, but not the hour before. So
The or in there cover that? I'm happy to go with the educational, but it has to be well done, obviously.
we do have a very good awareness group in Dover of animals.
I'm more concerned about visitors. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Burgess.
Yeah, it wouldn't affect the summertime hours at all, but in the wintertime it'd be closing at 4 o'clock, I should imagine, an hour before dark. I don't seem to have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay. Do I have any other questions or statements? No? Okay. So we go to the amended motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion, amended motion is carried.
There was one other one, just around safety and
that's
tracks.
right. Sorry about that. Yes. Yes.
Through you, Mayor, it was to insert a condition 15. The proponent ensures that there is some safety barrier to deter their patrons, particularly children, from accessing the railway tracks.
Are you happy with that? Do I have a seconder for that? Yes, Councillor Burgess. Any other comments on that? No? Yes?
Of course.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor, I agree with the safety barrier thing for a myriad of reasons, and I know that there's no requirement for it to be there, but it would be common sense to put one there because, you know, kids are fast, elderly could trip over getting out of a car and end up on the track. You know, I know the car park's raised and there's wheel stops and whatnot, but it would make sense for both parties to have protection for different reasons. So I think that would be a good idea. Yes.
Yes. Councillor?
Yeah, I also think it's extremely important that the onus is not put back onto the Ida Bay Railway. I mean, you know, Transformer have got the money to do this, whereas the Ida Bay Railway, it'd be yet another expense for them.
Yes, councillor Burgess. Did you? No?
Normally fences are a responsibility of both parties, isn't it? So I don't see anything wrong with the Ida Bay Railway being
It's not a
responsible
boundary
for...
fence.
No.
It's just a...
No.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll put that if no other conversation on that. All those in favour of that amended motion, please raise your hand. That's all, and the amended motion is carried.
I don't know what we were doing about the Phytophthora washdown, but we can, I guess I'd probably like to foreshadow that if we don't want everybody to do washdown, then I'd propose putting forward the current amended thing without the washdown and a more advisory sort of management of Phytophthora than the prescriptive one.
Through you, Mayor, the washdown is currently in the motion.
That's why I'm saying I'm foreshadowing. Yeah. If it doesn't go ahead, then I'd fall back to this motion as amended without the prescription of the washdown facility.
So you're moving another amended...
No, foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing.
Just foreshadowing, yeah.
All right.
Through you, Mayor, you have a same problem that we had at the last meeting. You have a motion for approval in front of you, so the alternative to an approval is a refusal. So if you were seeking an amendment to take out the...
I'll just amend that then. I'll put forward an amendment to remove the prescription of the foot washing facility but include mention of Phytophthora as a pathogen to be managed.
Does Councillor Gibson have a seconder for that? Councillor Burgess? Okay, I think we've talked about it. Yep, okay, yep, off you go then.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the only concern I have is that this is going to be potentially a number of visits, so it's going to be one of a number of visits that people will go to, so they might go to Hastings or somewhere else or whatever. Sensible biosecurity, and it's a special place. Yeah, there are unique aspects there. Putting a simple washdown mat with a bit of chlorhexidine or something on it is not a major issue for people as they enter the track, and we can't stop people wandering off the tracks or whatever necessarily unless we put, So I think for a very limited cost and inconvenience to people, I'd rather do that than see dieback whipping through the heathlands there. Yeah.
Fair enough. I retract that amendment.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Persuaded.
All right. So then we go back to the
original motion, Mayor.
The original amended motion. Yes. Would you like to close, Councillor Temby? What?
And as was said earlier, I really do appreciate Dark Lab and all of the work that's gone into this to make sure that the threatened species and habitat is being protected, and I commend the motion.
Thank you. I think All right, so I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour of the amended motion, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors, and the motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. I advise that the council is no longer acting as a planning authority as at
6:54.
General reports. Are there any councillors tabling their activities tonight?
Yes, Mayor.
Yep, thank you. So I have Councillor Thorpe, Burgess and Jessup, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to speak to on your activities? No?
Mayor, can I speak to an activity that I had in May, not April?
Yes, you may.
Yep. I attended the Wellbeing Committee, and because of timing we didn't get minutes through to this, but I'd just like to foreshadow some work that Lyle and his team are doing, contemplating how council might be persuaded to have a position on the Indigenous voice to Parliament at the moment. Council officers at the moment really can't say anything because we don't have a position. And really your three positions are either we do nothing and they say nothing, we say they can provide information and they can then use their time to source and provide information, or we as a group of councillors can have a position that they support or either not support the voice. So there's our three options, and our aim, and this is really just by way of warming people up to think about this. I hope, Lyle, we probably will look at some sort of motion to bring to the next council meeting. I think the staff are just consulting with our Aboriginal communities in the area to see what they think, because it's certainly not speaking with one voice across the community at the moment. So I just wanted to say that was a really good meeting that we had with the Wellbeing Committee, and I also attended after that the International Day Against Homophobia, and we had a little activity in the hub which was well attended. It was great to see so many young people who are exploring their own gender identities and supporting their friends and colleagues to do that. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. So we had the committee minutes have been checked by the committee chairs and have been distributed. So the drafts are, unconfirmed until the following meeting. 11.005/23 recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move a motion that the general reports and minutes for the period 1st to the 30th of April 2023 be received and noted? Councillor Thorpe, a seconder. Councillor Gibson. Do you wish to? No? Is there any councillor to speak? Yes, Councillor Gibson.
I did have one question through you to the General Manager,
Yes.
which is with regard to all of the discretionary approvals that go through you. There seem to be a lot of questions that don't pertain to planning, and so they get the response, that it's not a planning issue. But a lot of them are compliance issues. So you've got somebody who's got a neighbour who's wanting to approve something, and the other neighbour says, yeah, but they've already got, something else that's not right. I was wondering whether it would be constructive to rather than just pushing back and saying, well, it's not the business. Say, this is not the right forum to discuss this. But if you have a gripe about compliance, then there's this channel. So just something so that it makes the council not look quite so no. It makes us look more like, well, you've just got to ask it the right way.
Through to you, General Manager.
Yeah, and I think we do that. And it may have been an instance where you've seen it not be the case, and you can give us some specifics on that offline. But generally, the team are pretty good about, we'll refer this through to compliance or steer them back to compliance. So I guess if there's specifics, then we can certainly have a chat about it.
There were just a few in the. I just went through the list, and the responses were. I mean, I didn't see what response went back to the public, but the responses in the thing that it's not a planning matter. It's not a planning matter. So I guess, but maybe in the response back to the representative, there's more detail that I didn't see.
I'll take it on board.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, do I have any other? All right. All those in favour of that motion, please raise your hand. And that's all councillors. And the motion is carried. General Manager, would you like to advise on the workshops that have been held, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we had a workshop on the 3rd of May, which was regarding the draft budget. The Director of People and Corporate Services and Acting Manager Finance led a discussion regarding the draft budget for 23-24. This was an opportunity for councillors' input and the ability to discuss and ask questions as to its development and progress. We also had an online briefing around the future of local government from the local government division, so with all other Tasmanian councils. On the 10th of May, excuse me, on the 10th of May, we around the aquatic centres, so the Acting Director, Community Wellbeing and Manager Recreation Services open discussion regarding Council's 2 aquatic facilities. This was an opportunity for councillors' input and the ability to discuss and ask questions. On the 17th of May, 2 items, the annual plan, so Director, Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development and Manager Strategy and Performance Reporting provided a draft annual plan for 23-24 for Council's review and comment. And also the draft budget, so Director People and Corporate Services and Acting Manager Finance led a discussion regarding the draft budget for 23-24. This was the final opportunity for councillors' input and the ability to discuss and ask questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. 13, councillor questions. There was none taken on notice, but 13.2 is questions without notice. Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Mayor. Has there been a response to the letter we sent to Kim Evans, Secretary of Department of State Growth, on the 13th of April 2023, requesting a meeting as per the councillor motion which was passed unanimously at the general meeting of 29 March? I am aware, well, I guess a second part to the question, and so can I get the first question answered?
Oh, no, that's only acknowledgement of the email.
Thank you, Mayor.
Of the letter, yeah.
So I am aware that Kingborough have responded and that they're happy to be involved in the discussion. As stated in the letter, we seek support from Kingborough Council and the State Government to progress a regional road safety review in collaboration with the Huon Valley. The motion calls for the State Government to fund this as a regional pilot program which may inform a strategic response to the 2022 Legislative Council Select Committee Road Safety Inquiry recommendations, specifically recommendation 25 of the inquiry being state road authorities collaborate to implement a consistent approach to managing speed limits on state and local roads. Our whole road network is of vital importance to the state economy. Starting at a negligible point in 2002, the Huon Valley saw a remarkable rise over the 20 years, with more than $800 million in headline gross regional product, representing a growth rate of 8% in 2021. This is nearly double that of Tasmania's headline regional gross regional product during the same period. However, the safety of our residents needs to be considered within the context of an efficient road network.
Yes. So
RACT.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no, but what I mean is,
okay.
Your question is.
Okay.
Like,
I thought I had 3 minutes.
Well, yes, but
okay.
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor. So it's the current system of reviewing and changing speed limits is inefficient and not meeting expectations of the community and consumes considerable council resources. The question is, can a follow-up letter be sent to Kim Evans, Department of State Growth, to schedule a meeting and progress towards greater collaboration, and send a copy of the relevant to the relevant minister and premier?
I will speak to the Director of Infrastructure, and because he wrote the last one, and yeah, I'll get back to you on that one.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a second question.
Yes, you go for it then.
Thank you. As we know, the principal legislation in establishing the powers and functions of Tasmanian Government is in part to provide for the municipal areas peace, order and good governance. Caitlin Metz posted about antisocial behaviour on the Huon Valley community page yesterday. One of the replies pointed to the difficulty in accessing counselling services for young people. Could we have a briefing from the Director of Community Wellbeing on observations regarding on their observations regarding antisocial behaviour and its impact in the Huon Valley in order that we can better understand and be informed and lobby for more resources.
Can we take that? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, go for it, Lyle. Yep.
We certainly can. Our youth development officer is actually quite knowledgeable in this area around antisocial behaviour, and I'm sure she would welcome an opportunity to sort of discuss her insights into that. The other opportunity we have is on the 19th of July. We have the police giving us the 6-monthly briefing. We could certainly raise it there. So there's obviously the proactive component that our youth development officer is trying to work towards achieving, or at least plugging a gap, and then we can deal with the compliance issues, or at least raise them with the police at that time. But yes, we will definitely do that.
Yes, councillor.
Thank you. Look, I'll just make a comment as chair of that committee. We have one youth development officer, and I'm not, but she's pretty busy out there talking to youth. I wonder if any of the, because the committee's got a really good shared knowledge base, and I'd certainly, maybe as an alternative, encourage any council to come to the next meeting, which is on Wednesday afternoon, and have a talk with the committee and raise it as a committee issue, and then we can add it to our work plan rather than have a staff writing letters. So that's an option, I suppose, because I think there's aged representatives on the committee as well, and I think there's a pretty wide level of concern about antisocial behaviour from all aspects of the committee. So that's just an alternative way of dealing with it. But any councillor is welcome to the group. We're a very friendly, happy, welfare-y type group.
And I'd just like to say that I have been speaking with the Mayor at Derwent Valley, and they're having some issues there as well. We've talked about the connection through the road with STT after our meeting the other day. So I am meeting with Michelle, and I know they were going to have a forum on youth in the Derwent Valley, but I think we can link together and try and do this as a collective, because it is we will have to go to state government for this area, but we can definitely lobby then if we're doing it together. Yes.
Thank you. I would like perhaps that briefing could go to the committee, and I would like to attend that committee when it is presented. Thank you. And I think it seems to be going back to resources all the time, and that's why I asked in my first question to have the letter be forwarded to the Minister, because if we're going to have change management, we need leadership, and we need it to come from the Minister, because the operators, the people working in council and in state government are busy doing their day-to-day work. This is a strategic direction that we need, or there are strategic directions that we need to come from the Minister. Thank you.
I've got three, but they're quite short and snappy. I'm a little concerned at the number of letters and emails that have been addressed to the GM and Mayor, which have also been copied to councillors, which are going unanswered, sometimes for months. And I just wanted to ask what processes are being set up to ensure that residents are being adequately responded to within the time limits prescribed in our customer charter and our service level agreement. For instance, perhaps a monitored register of questions and issues could be established on our document management system, if not already there, and councillors notified when these have been answered with a link to the letters sent. And just a couple of examples. There's a chap who'd asked about executive pay, the lady who wrote to us asking for more time to download and examine DAs. There's the one that we got answered today about the BAL. And it's just, if we're going to, improve trust and the number of sort of positive feelings we get in the community, it would be helpful if we could, even if we're just acknowledging people's letters.
Thank you. Yes. I'll come back to you. I know that we're looking at a new system to do with collecting and.
We are. We're I guess in part always looking to improve. So I think the most important part is for our community to go through that HVC. That's how we largely are able to keep on top of the timelines around it. And so that way it gets registered, it goes into our information management system and tasked to the relevant person for a prompt reply. As we've had a chat about, there are some members of the community who choose to use this avenue to circumvent and try and get a different answer after having had an existing answer. So I'm also conscious that it will help us manage those things. So we're always aiming to get 10 working days and respond in that way, but there may be some required work to be able to accurately respond to some of these things, and they're not always very simple things, especially when they're starting to be sent to Mayor and GM. And so, look, we certainly are continuing to explore options as to how we can effectively manage it, and currently looking at a new portal at the moment. So just try and help us manage that workload. So there's a fair bit coming through as you're looking.
Yeah, thank you. Grateful for that, because when we get letters sent to all councillors, they sort of remain on our sort of action lists until they're switched off. So it's just nice to know that they are being dealt with.
I'm glad you've got the time to look at them all, Jenny. That's really good. Yes, next one.
On the 15th of December 2022, we passed a motion to contact Sustainable Timbers Tasmania and embark on a stakeholder relationship with them, and also to work on identifying forest areas held in great affection by community. I've now several times asked when a meeting would be arranged, and have always been told that diaries can't be aligned. When STT themselves asked to meet with us recently about litter and hooning, I was somewhat surprised to discover that STT had only just seen that motion just before the meeting. And we've promptly written letters in response to other council motions, e.g. to Taswater, Shipwrights Point and Kingborough Council and State Growth regarding road safety, and I'm curious as to why a letter was not sent to STT following that December motion, including a copy of the motion and a copy of that correspondence put in our intranet for all councillors.
I'll just need to clarify that when I said that they'd got it, I'd given it to them. Lachlan, the director, has been in talks with STT.
Okay.
And he's not here tonight, so I can't go through to him. But can you? I will take that on notice. But I know that he definitely had been in talks with them about that motion prior to when we had them in for the waste.
Because we did have copies of all the other letters are on our intranet, but there was nothing about contact being made with STT.
Yeah, and I don't know to what effect, but I know that he told me that he had been in contact with them about that, but I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
I did follow up with him there.
Okay.
And again, no timeline was largely agreed on this one, and a follow-up conversation did happen in a sense that you've sort of spoken to, but we're also just conscious that starting this process means that we also need to have a resource to keep those things moving. So we didn't talk to in that motion what we might pause or what we might be able to stop or get any resource. And so largely in going through that work, there's a project type of approach here in a sense of understanding the risks, and so in talking to the director, having investigated the issue, the likelihood of logging operations and commencing and the complexities required by the motion, the project commencement or that engagement has been delayed until we can get the resource to be able to make sure we get that good outcome and have that dedicated resource to be able to move it forward. He hasn't shared with me what that timeline would look like, so we can circle back to you on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, with respect, some of the other motions, letters have been sent out promptly, and they would also have required some level of resource. But I take the point. I just have one last question. It's about really the waste management team have done absolutely fantastic work modernising our systems and practices, particularly with regard to data, etc., and extending our curbside collection areas. But you'll know there's been some confusion among a few residents regarding when bins were collected and the extent of the collection areas. And I just wondered if there's any lessons that have been learnt from that with respect to how we communicate service changes to our ratepayers going forward, whether, you know, that sort of thing can be learnt from, so we can do things a little, you know, better next time.
Thank you. Through to you, General Manager.
Mayor. So I did also engage on this one, and so the waste management team had a meeting on the 9th of May just to review the process and identify improvements, which is, again, just living our value, that continuous improvement one. So the key findings, which I'll list below, but the several changes have been actioned already, so we've promptly got onto it, appreciating that there were some opportunities, and also we're going to be looking to share some of those opportunities with the broader organisation from that team review. So there's about 8 points here, so I'll read them because they're quite comprehensive, and I think it's good reflection points. So project communication risks need to be fully understood and managed as part of every project plan. Consulting at a strategic level was insufficient in this particular instance, so we want customers wanted additional consultation on some specific actions. The customer expectations for information content is highly variable, so we want to simplify and have a page one message that is, you know, what does it mean specifically for you, and then on the alternate side something more general. And so we'll use a variety of maps, tables, descriptions, and media as different approaches suit different people. So again, just trying to be general but also be specific to the needs. We also had the council's customer information database needs enhancing. So again, our technology journey continues there. So we want to make sure that customers receive information more efficiently, cost effectively, and via their preferred media. So information can be also tailored to residents, which includes rental tenants, as well as owners, which may not be residents. A number of issues, both internal and external to council, were identified in the distribution of physical mail, including a detailed process with turnaround times to ensure delivery times are met. Local media and community message boards should be used earlier and more frequently. Information sharing between council business units needs to improve, especially to support the customer service team. And the council service database needs enhancing to support information customised by property, i.e. a clickable map to show a curbside service arrangement for each property. So.
Could I just add one message to that from my own observations, is that just use very simple, unambiguous language. I mean, I read the website page, and obviously to somebody who knew, you know, knew that what was happening inside out, it would have been understandable. But looking at it with an objective eye, I actually could understand some of the confusion. And I just think, you know, maybe just getting someone in to look at some of the communications come out to make sure there's no ambiguity and it's very simple. It would be just really helpful, I think.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other questions? Yes, Councillor?
I've actually asked this already by email, but I just wanted to reiterate it here. And it was just a question around dormant subdivisions and how, whether we can somehow get a list of those together. And I don't want this to be too onerous, but when they come back sometimes they're dormant for a long time, and then when they come back, it looks like we've just approved a new subdivision, which we haven't. It's just been sitting there, and at the developer's discretion, they've decided now's the time to open it up. So I think it would be really good if we were aware of where they were, and at least to some extent. Also for planning for infrastructure, I think that, you know, we keep talking about all of the subdivisions off the back of Port Huon, and I don't know. I don't have a clear idea of actually how many lots there are there, and when they're likely to come online, and I don't quite know how best to manage it, but I think it is an issue that we should be aware of in some way.
Thank you. Through to you, Director, if that's okay.
Through you, Mayor, it is difficult to collate such a list. We'd have to go through absolutely every subdivision approved over the last 15, 20 years, because there are some subdivisions which are just activating now, which should achieve substantial commencement over 10, 11, 12 years ago. There are some subdivisions which actually go back to Port Signet days, where in those days they would just allow you to do one lot, and then that activated the whole subdivision, and there could be 30 or 40 lots remaining. We only find out about them when they come back to want to actually develop them. So it is really difficult. We'd have to dedicate somebody a lot of time to be able to pull those out. The other thing is that we're not aware of what people are doing on a subdivision, but they may have progressed to substantial commencement within the time provided, but not come to us until a time after. So there's a lot of information that we just simply don't have.
Is there some way we can draw a line on these old subdivisions and request that they at least get renewed?
No. Once they've been active, so once they've substantially commenced,
they can sit forever.
They can sit forever.
Okay, do I have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Mayor. It's actually a question from a member of the public. I've got three, but I'll just do two because one's quite long. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So they want to talk about the Huon Valley Land Use and Development Strategy, and they are aware that there is currently some minor consultation being conducted in 5 areas of the Huon Valley, and they would like to know, they say the purpose of the consultation is to better understand the future needs of the Huon Valley community. They would like to know, could Council please clarify whether these workshops are actually a pilot project to assess the sensitivity of the questionnaire and format of community participation? And given the difficulty of people accessing the discussion documents, is it the Council's intention to make these documents more accessible to the populace in the Huon Valley? And if yes, how would this be achieved?
Through you, General Manager, to the Director, if I may.
Through you, Mayor, I might have to ask the question to be asked again. It would be better if we could talk actually directly with that person, just to understand what the access needs are. So that's a bit of a difficulty that we have, because it's...
Well, I can tell you what the access needs are, because that was another question that they sent me also. They're finding the website very difficult to operate. They have... I can just give you a snippet. A snippet of the discussion with me was that the discussion paper does not appear on the homepage of the Huon Valley website. Given the significance of the paper and its potential impact on the lives and fortunes of people in the valley, it seems unusual to hide the document. Under obscure tabs such as Have Your Say, have your say, what does this heading mean? There are a number of meanings a person could derive from this heading. Firstly, is it an idiom? And then it goes on a little bit here. And then it says, thirdly, the document is referred to by different names. This may be fine for the people in the know, but is unclear for ordinary people when they are trying to find information. They could be at a disadvantage because they don't know the proper terms. Example, under the Have Your Say tab, there is a heading, Land Use and Development Strategy, no mention of discussion paper, until you read further down the article and find two links to two separate papers. The question then arises, which one am I meant to read, or am I meant to read both? It goes on to say that the information, whether a mistake or intent, disempowers the people who are most affected by these changes, the title holders and residents of the Huon Valley. So basically it's back to the website and the problems people have accessing it and not understanding clearly what they're supposed to be accessing. So what are we going to do about that?
Through you, Mayor, that's the first feedback that has come past me, so I'll talk to our team in relation to that. I will just make a comment that we do have our Have Your Say page that has certainly been recognised as to where we put all that information. You'd be questioning where we start and stop in relation to putting things onto the homepage, but we'll certainly look at that.
So maybe I was sort of having a little brainstorm, and I thought maybe, you know, on our homepage or on our Facebook page or something, we could actually have a logo or come up with some form of advertising of land use strategy and then connect it to Have Your Say, so people can see, you know, a banner or an icon and recognise what they're looking for when they go to Have Your Say, like maybe advertise what it is a little bit more, just so that there's that memory recognition. Because presently it is a bit confusing. I mean, I was reading the wrong document today and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, you know, so it's easy to do. It's on Facebook, but if you don't follow Facebook, you know, a lot of people don't follow Facebook, and this is the point of it as well. But I just thought if we could make that a bit easier for them. There was one other really quick one.
Maybe you could also have that person make contact if they're having a lot of trouble. Maybe they could, through you, you know, like come in and or go into the hub, and
they're actually fairly proficient with the computer. It's the website they're having the problems with.
Okay, move on then.
It is a good point, I think, Mayor. 'Cause I mean, if I type in, for instance, into the search term land use and development strategy, it doesn't come up with the new one and the process we're going through. It comes up with the old one, and
Yes.
you can't actually find where the new one is. And the same with the community vision; it comes up with the old community plan. You know, so it's just things like that. Because most people would go through the search, box rather than So
and I think that's what happens, you know, and then they have to fossick through because they're not quite sure.
Because it's not obvious from the drop-down menus.
Another one? Just a quick one. This is a planning question that they've asked, and it just quickly, it says many people have approached that person and said that planning is the most important function of council. I imagine they mean in a conversational sense, as it affects every part of the community: health, welfare, education, finance, wealth and potential poverty. The same group of people have questioned the fact that the General Manager has seemingly not involved himself in the planning process or attended any of the hearings. They're also hugely concerned at the enormous amounts of ratepayer funds that are going into a process that is no better than throwing the baby out with the bathwater. In 2016, Huon Valley Council gained an award for the best LUDs. And then she says, I have recently reread the previous LUDs. What I can say, it is a far superior document to anything that has been produced over the last couple of years. Is it time to have a moratorium on the planning process, commencing with the staying of the planning budget and establishment of special planning committee of council, properly review the whole planning process and put a stop to the incessant waste of money? Thank you, Mayor. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll get back to you on the advertising, on the website bit, or if that's okay.
I can forward these to you at some stage too.
That would be handy. Through you, Mayor, just in relation to the expenditure of funds, Council is in the process that the state government has commenced to be able to make significant changes to the LPS, and there's been a lot of criticism in relation to translation and so forth. To be able to make those translations, we need a new land use development strategy in place. So if we put that on hold, we put on hold any future changes, or any changes in the medium term, at least in relation to the planning scheme. There's also a review of the Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy, which will be coming up in the next couple of over the next couple of years as well, which we'll need to be participating and active in, because some of those strategies, such as rural living, those strategies restrict our ability to produce significant rural living within the Huon Valley as well.
Yes, General Manager.
I just respond to the expectation that I attend the meetings, and I think it's important to note that I'm not ignorant of what's going on, and while not sitting there, it's obviously something that's discussed a fair bit, and our representation there comes in pretty much daily and briefs us on what is going on, and so we do stay across it. I do stay across it But yeah, actually, I'm not going to sit there. I think it's over 20 odd days that they're sitting, so you can imagine the resource that we're already putting into representation there. So I think just wanted to highlight I'm not ignorant of what is going on.
Yeah, I think it's good to have those conversations too whilst people are watching or listening or it's noted, because I'm not quite sure that people do fully grasp that, you know, everybody has a role and everybody is actually informed, like we are all informed, even though we haven't been sitting there daily either. You know, we all have jobs and business we need to attend to. So it's good to actually let people know that we do keep abreast of what's going on, regardless of the fact of whether we're there or not. So thank you.
Yeah, and I speak to them daily when they're here. Yeah. I've sat in on a couple, but other times I've just come in and made note with the panel. Yeah. Okay. Do I have any other questions? Good. 13.3, councillors' notice of motions. We have several notice of motions tonight. The first one is Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Armstrong, are you happy to move the motion as included in the report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
If so, do I have a seconder? Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just for a little bit. I haven't actually written anything down because it's fairly self-explanatory, and at the last meeting we all voted, or I think we all voted, I voted to take up a walk along the riverside, which all sounded like a good idea at the time, but what actually happened was the opposite, and I ended up getting quite a lot of comments from people that they were not happy, and they were not happy for a variety of reasons. Mostly that if they had leases, the council would be taking leases over them. We tried to explain that it didn't matter because it belongs to the Crown. So basically a lease is just a piece of paper that says you can use land and whatnot. But I think the thing is too, like, nobody actually consulted anybody before before the discussion of taking leases out. I don't think anyone's been spoken to in person other than perhaps through the land care groups. I've spoken to lots of people that are unhappy, and whilst they may be a minority, they have actually come forward and voiced that they are not happy about this. And my thing is also that there's risk involved to council if we take out these leases. There's risk involved to landowners. There's risk involved to livestock. There's a lot of risk. I know that Councillor Gibson explained that the risk was low and that it was just a walking track, and that's all good, but the river does rise. There are people that aren't happy with that arrangement. There are people that are happy with that arrangement, but at the end of the day, whether we take out a lease or don't take out a lease, it doesn't really matter, because leases are not worth the piece of paper that they're written on, apparently. If we can take a lease over somebody that has a lease and still use that property because it's Crown land, then what is the point in taking out a lease? So I feel like had I been a bit more informed about the motion, and perhaps that was my ignorance because I'm a rookie councillor, I wouldn't have voted for it. So with that said, I would like to put the motion that resolution number 13.002 at the council meeting 29th of March 2023 for the council to apply for and take up Crown leases for public use as riverside parks along the Huon River from Southbridge to Judbury, on the south side of the Huon River, and from Ranelagh to Judbury on the north side be overturned. Please. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, do I have any questions for that? Yes, Councillor Gibson.
I'd like to put forward an alternative motion, if I could, please. That council pauses the application for a lease along the river until I, Councillor Gibson, bring back a report to council, to a council meeting including consultation with community and landholders, maps of all existing leases and licences, and clarifications of pros and cons and risks of the council lease.
Does Councillor Gibson have a seconder for that motion, amended motion? Councillor Camber-Smith.
You'd like me to send it through now?
Yes, please.
Can I just briefly talk to that?
Yes, you may.
I'll just send this to Matthew first.
While you're doing that,
Yeah.
I've been notified that one of the residents have letter dropped the people that live on the river there to tell them to contact Crown Land to take up a licence or a lease, because they're not yet, before council does, which has then created a bit of work at Crown Land, which I don't know if they're that happy about. But anyway, I'll leave that for you.
Yes, and perhaps the order of this should have been different, but I think that, every time the community is consulted, walking tracks and access to our landscapes is one of the highest ranking, by far, one of the highest ranking requests from our community. It's in, if you read through the new community vision thing, it's actually listed as walking on the Huon River is access to the Huon River is one of the priorities. So I think for us to show leadership, we should back the people, I guess, who want this. The original motion supports the community access to land, and this land has essentially been privatised by a few the landholders who adjoin the Crown Land Reserve. So, in terms of council goals, it addresses our great environment goal. It addresses our progressing climate change mitigation goal. It addresses sustainable land management and environment goals. It addresses building volunteer capacity in the Huon, and it addresses community wellbeing and livability. So, that's a hell of a lot of council objectives being addressed by this project. The Tasmanian government is encouraging nature-based tourism on Crown Land. It's specifically written into their Crown Land management document. So I think we can show leadership by sticking with the original motion, but I understand Councillor Armstrong's concern, and we can let all these other leases play out, and according to, if that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. I know that there's also a lot of people who are very keen for this sort of access to be encouraged. Councillor Thorpe put a 5-year time frame to review the success or otherwise of the project, which I think's sensible. So this motion just pauses the signing of the lease, allowing time to consult and collect more information, and resolve some of people's concerns about legal risks, and the information can come back to council for discussion.
Yes, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I just want to speak for Paul's motion. I'm really speaking for the original motion, but I just think it'd be really sad and disappointing if for the majority of the community, if we can't find a way around progressing this initiative. We've only heard from the people.
Have you got your microphone on? Have you got your microphone? Yep. Yep.
So, I was just saying, I think it would be very sad and disappointing for the majority of the community if we can't find a way around progressing this initiative. We've only been sent emails from those who are negative about the idea, but from all the people I've spoken to, the concept clearly has enormous support. About 1,000 people have contributed to our draft community vision, and resulting in active transport and places to walk being an extremely high priority for people. And I quote, "It's safe and easy to move around townships, supported by adequate paths and trails. Natural values are a significant part of the local tourism experience, from the hills to the Huon River, with improved access to the river through walking trails and marine transport infrastructure. We're a council in charge of governing 19,000 people, soon to be 20,000 people, and we've got to govern for all. We can't please everyone. And we need to speak up for those who aren't sending us, the negative emails. Everybody I've spoken to is as I say, is incredibly enthusiastic. And all we'd be doing is legitimising the fact that it is Crown, i.e. in public land, and protecting people's existing right to use it. Less than 0.5% of Huonville residents live in the houses adjoining these leases. And I've just noticed that in this the documentation that came out today for the meeting, there was a number of comments that came through on the draft community vision. 3 more of those all list walking tracks as being their prime consideration. And one of the first one I picked up, love the focus on increasing walking tracks, cycling tracks and outdoor passive recreation opportunities. A walking track along the length of the Huon River would be a spectacular achievement. Another one, pathways and public transport is really important to us. I'd love to see more means to explore and exercise in the valley via accessible paths and tracks. More walking tracks and access to the Huon River, that's another one. And in our draft land use and development strategy that's just come out, improved walking and cycling infrastructure, range of walking paths in the town, but there's lack of connection and integration for pedestrians. We have a huge opportunity to increase walking and cycling infrastructure across the municipality. Constraints include integration of the Huon River. And I just wanted to pick out an example, if I may, that I lived through. Yeah, all right, I'll wrap it up quickly. The Snug to Margate shared path in Kingborough, when that was first mooted, there was huge pushback from people who lived alongside the track. They were worried about exactly the same things that people here have raised, i.e. security, lack of privacy, lack of rights, all this sort of thing. But now that the path's up and running, it's become incredibly popular. Families, dog walkers, young mums, and very unusually, because no one ever has a good word for the local council, Kingborough Council has received huge amounts of congratulatory letters and thank you emails for having the vision to get this done. So, you know, it's our duty to have the vision, to see the big picture and take a long view and not just be swayed by, you know, the few people who feel this might inconvenience them.
Yes, Councillor Burgess and then Councillor Temby.
Yes, if I could, Mayor. I'm just really baffled to think that Huon Valley Council would actually want to take on. I voted for it originally. Probably not enough information. What Councillor Gibson is saying now is probably the right way around to do it. But I really don't think it's council responsibility to be planning tracks and making tracks on that scale. Councillor Campbell-Smith just mentioned there's 1,000 people interested, and it's a great idea. Surely out of that 1,000 they could get their own group together and they could actually push it.
That's exactly what we wanted.
That is the intent.
That was the motion.
Council is...
I didn't hear that in the motion.
Community-led.
It's community-led. It's always been community-led.
Well, I apologise for not listening.
No, it's not. We have no. There's no budget for this.
No.
All council is doing is legitimising the project.
Yes, all I can say is the experience that I've had, we started that way. The first thing we did was went to the landowners. Now we've got through the process and we'll probably see a different...
We'll probably
a similar thing, but on a much smaller scale.
Probably incorrectly.
So I think what... Yeah, all right, I'll change my mind.
I went around the other way because I was hoping to stem off 101 leases all being taken out to try and block it. That's not worked, and it was probably the wrong way to go. So, more consultative approach is what I'm proposing in this motion.
And there is a Oh, sorry. I just wanted to...
Yes,
I just asked, what was the timescale that you had in mind for all the consultation?
Because I realise that there's no budget for council to do it, that's why I'm putting my hand up to do it. I can't... I'm away for July with my daughter in Europe, so... it won't be in a hurry, but we've got 5 years, so I'm hoping to complete the consultation this year.
Okay, Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to clarify, we don't actually, council doesn't need to take up the Crown lease because they already have the public already have that right to access. And secondly, with regards to your motion, you're suggesting that it's community-led, which is what I was thinking would be a good idea. However, you haven't mentioned that it's going to, you said that it's going to come back to council with your report, but then the next part of what you should be, I think, including in the motion is to suggest that it comes back to council to make a decision then as to whether or not it takes up leasing. But I reiterate that I don't think we actually need to take up the lease in order for this to happen.
Just to answer your question, the intention is to bring this information back and make that decision.
Can I just add to that I'm pretty sure if Crown Land, if council got the leases or the licences on that property, the onus of anything that happens would be back on council. I know that would be the case.
That's the risk.
If anyone hurt themselves.
Well, I actually think that there's good reason to cover that, because for a council to increase their
Public liability.
their public liability for something like that is extremely small change for council, and to cover our people, the volunteers who are sort of working there, I think is a really good thing for council to do.
Yes, Councillor Hammersmith?
Yeah, I mean, we must already hold public liability. I mean, the people must be hurting themselves on our recreation ovals constantly. So, I mean, people are just only going to be walking down the river. They're not going to be, it's going to be quite a different sort of, Yes, I have. Sorry,
No.
I've forgotten what it was now. I actually wanted to answer Kathy's thing about the us not having to take out the leases, because I mean we've had this situation in Crabtree. There's a watering hole there. Crown Land. Everybody had the right to go in there, but nobody dared, because the people who lived alongside it put an electric fence across it, and anybody who went near it, they yelled at them. And that's exactly what's happening. What happens if people try to do this? And the only people who are able to use it at the moment are those who draw up alongside on the vacant lots and do a bit of fishing from their boats, because nobody dare walk along the other bits of Crown Land, even though they are Crown Land and public land.
Okay, all right. Yes, Councillor Jessup?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I don't think council having a lease will actually stop grumpy people being grumpy, and all it will do is create compliance issues for our staff, and we already have that in something that's been raised to us in Crabtree not that long ago. But look, I just wanted to state I had some reservations when we were discussing the motion, and I do believe I moved an amendment that we actually investigate it, but that was voted down. And I was under the impression at the time that the land was not in use and not being leased. I've since discovered through Councillor Gibson that in fact the large portions of this land is probably leased, and a second lease was possible. And look, I've also discovered that this land is prone to significant flooding. I've seen a photo of a tractor with about that much of its exhaust pipe under the water, they are part of integrated farming operations, which are quite big. A lot of the land's agricultural land, so we're talking about serious farming organisations. So that lends me to think around biosecurity and around a whole range of issues. And just a personal experience, I own some land along the Commandy River. The council came to me, wanted to lease a section to put a concrete path along the river, or a stone path. When I said, well, what happens if somebody wanders off the path and breaks their leg, the council officer's response to me was, well, that would be your problem. I was none too pleased with that response and suggested some alternatives where they might put their path. But you've got big operations with big machinery and big, so that worries me, and I don't think we would escape the liability, and I don't think we could possibly escape the biosecurity liability. So if your motion gets up, a good look at that would be important. But the other comment that I'd make is, we've got a beautiful plan for a path along the Huon River between Huonville and Geeveston or Franklin. That's well conceptualised. There would be sections of that where Landcare groups could without any fight from anybody, because it's between the road and the river, could actually do developmental work. I know Councillor Burgess is always looking for people to do bush hacking, looking for old railway tracks and things like that. So I just think there are a lot of opportunities already that exist, and I'm concerned that we're going to agitate a lot of people, and people who not necessarily have operations on those properties, but family members and people who work there and the like. And we probably should have explored that more, and I do apologise to the community for the angst for not doing my homework a month ago. So I'd certainly very happy to support passive recreation, very happy to support non-conflictual land uses wherever we can, and working with sustainable timber and forestry and those sort of organisations to look at options. But I just think that this is a difficult one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just respond to that briefly.
Yes, you may. We do need to. Yeah, you're right.
I guess I have a question back to you, Councillor Jessup. Do we govern for the few, or do we govern for the population of the Huon? That's the question.
I'll take that as a rhetorical question, and you'll give me the answer now.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that is we govern for everybody. And I think there are landholders along the river, and Jenny sent us a few messages from people. So we can work with those people who want to engage people on their properties. But I think if people want to do that, they can. And again, my concern is, do we govern over the people as a council? And I think this is another example where we're maybe putting ourselves in a space where we don't need to be, because as Councillor Burgess has shown, he's got on with the job without council being involved. And I think the Landcare groups are very good at doing that. They have their own insurances, and we fund some of them, I think, through grants, and there's no reason why they can't apply for grants to get our support. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Temby. Yeah, is it a question to? Yeah.
The question is, can we turn this around to being a positive, inclusive opportunity to engage with the community, because there are a lot of benefits in riparian zone revegetation. There's benefits to the landowners because it's actually improving the water quality. And there is an opportunity there to talk with the community and bring them with us. But I don't believe we need to actually take on the leases. Currently, according to the motion, it says these are public reserves managed by Tasmanian Parks and Wildlife Service under the Crown Lands Act. So they're already public reserves. So let's bring the community with us instead of forcing our will on to the community. Engage in a conversation, a dialogue, to discuss riparian zone revegetation for the benefits of the community, the health of the river, and the farmers themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Temby.
I guess that's what this motion is suggesting.
Well, yeah, okay. So we have the amended motion that was put forward by Councillor Gibson and seconded by Councillor Campbell-Smith, and that is?
Through you, Mayor, that Council pauses the application for a lease along the river until Councillor Gibson brings back a report to a council meeting, including consultation with community and landholders, maps of all existing leases and licences, clarification of pros and cons and risks of a council or to the council? To the council.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour of the amended motion, please raise your hand. That is Councillor Gibson, Campbell-Smith and Temby. Those against is Doyle, Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup and Burgess. And the amended motion is lost. So we go back to to Councillor Armstrong. Do you wish to close on your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You could quote out of the land use documents and strategies, and you could always find something in there that is going to sound much better and much bigger than what other people want. You will always upset somebody to get a result with somewhere else. The thing is with the river, it is beautiful, but we're not short of river. You can float down it, you can exit the sides of it, you can walk along the riverside, you can float all the way up and all the way down if you want to. You can do whatever you want. What I don't want to do is put council in a position where we take over leases, lots of leases, plural, with no money. Somehow we become responsible for the upkeep. We don't need a lease to use that property. Like you pointed out yourself, we don't need a lease. What is the only benefit of us having a lease is to have some sort of emotional hold over the people that don't want us to have a lease. And that causes frustration and it causes anger. And the fact that we've had correspondence from angry people and no correspondence from happy people kind of tells us that it probably wasn't an approach that we took well. I would suggest that Landcare communicate with the people, and you communicate with the people, not as a councillor, but just as a person. And if there's people along that route that are happy to have that land used for walking, then there is no reason why you couldn't just go off and do that yourself without involving us as a council.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Doyle, Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Temby and Burgess. And those against is Councillor Gibson and Canberra Smith. And the motion was carried. Councillor Jessup, are you happy to move the motion as included in the reports?
I am, Mayor, thank you.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Jessup? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose I'm going to have to read the motion, aren't I? I'll write a shorter one next time. Look, I raise this motion to ensure that the voice of...
As presented in the agenda.
Yeah, do I do an introduction first? I'm allowed to do my preamble,
Yep,
aren't I?
yep, you can.
So, I've got my 3 minutes of preamble and 10 minutes of reading the motion.
Yeah.
Look, I raise a motion to ensure that the voice of the elected planning authority, that is the people in this room around this table, is clearly heard in the current LPS hearing process. I am concerned that the clear intent we articulated in the 35F report in our principles are not being consistently voiced in the hearing process, and the Commission and the community may well have formed a view that the Planning Authority is not committed to these principles. I have attended 6 or 7, I think, 6 in person and a few others on video of these hearings, and I'll be honest, I am frustrated, and I was frustrated to read an extract from one of our consultant staff, who basically said she doesn't agree with our principles, in fact, and she's there to give an expert opinion, and in terms of what I think a site should be zoned. And quite clearly said that the principles are of no relevance to her because she isn't there for that reason. Yet she very quickly speaks on behalf of the Planning Authority, and often is the first voice to be heard from the Planning Authority. The environmental consultant is overstretching the REM model, and specifically we actually said that we were concerned about the REM model, and has made a number of statements. He's using a 500 metre catchment for one species where he says, I know 100 metres is what's required, but I'm going to use 500 metres instead. I even heard him recently say, no, I agree with the professional report that there are no threatened species here, but they may grow back. Therefore, I think we should do this as a certain zoning. Totally agreed that the overlay was incorrect, that the report said that. So, yeah, and I can tell you the face of the commissioners is often bemused, I think is the best term to use. I'm committed to the planning process that we have in place and to the the large sum of money that we're investing as a council in the LUDS process. And I'm not trying to circumvent the LUDS process, and I think we should move on with that. I note that there's some staff concerned about my comments regarding rural living, and that's been one of the areas where it's been quite heavily contested. And rural living does need investigation under the LUDS. As it is a land use that's not favoured as an ad hoc development under the Southern Land Use Strategy, and I absolutely agree with that. There are limits on that. And I don't think as a council, planning authority, we want ad hoc developments of small patches of rural living. I think we need to be cognisant of that. So it needs to be done within a strategic framework that we obviously as a group need to go away and talk to the officers about how we change the LUDS to include that, and probably spending more money, I suspect. I note that, General Manager, you made the comment about my anecdotal advice, and as a market researcher and ex-president of the Market Research Society in certain jurisdictions, that's like telling me that I've got pink hair or something. So I thought I'd do a bit more research for you. It was a cutting statement, cut me to the quick. But let me tell you, and make it less anecdotal for you. It's often mentioned in the Vision research that we've read, the report here, that people want this form of rural living, and it's often said, in the LUDS we will deal with that. There's quite a few statements in the back of the report that says that. In the interim planning scheme, we had 2,321 titles that could be classed as lifestyle. So that's the rural living or environmental living blocks. They had an implied right to build a house. This was cut under the LPS by half, and after effective community lobbying, a number of environmental living zones came back in, and in the end 1,570 lots were put up in the 35F report. This means that we've cut 751 titles that were lifestyle blocks that had an implied right to build a house. This means that 751 people, if they don't have a house on their blocks, will have to do a DA, will have to do extra reports, will have to pay extra money, and will overwork our poor, hard-working planners. And finally, I thought I would do some primary research for you, General Manager, and I talked to 3 of our largest real estate firms, and I did a little bit of market research. And interestingly, the key groups that are looking for properties at the moment in the area are late life tree changers or retirees, followed by families with younger to middle-aged children, so those sort of people. And to quote one of the principals of one of these organisations, by far the largest demand was for a little house on 5 acres on or a small to middle-sized rural living block. There is a massive undersupply for this land, is what I was told by all the people I talked to. Multi-residential and urban, by all means, is certainly also strongly desired as well, but less so than hobby farms. Yes. So, that's my comment. Shall I now read the motion? Can I
just
say
take
read?
the motion as read.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Grimsey, for your common sense comment there.
It's 13,
I commend this motion as read to my fellow Planning Authority representatives.
Okay. Do I have any questions? Yes, Councillor Temby? Yeah.
So, do we speak for the motion or against the motion first, or?
No, I'm asking.
Okay, all right. So council's planners and expert consultants are there to give expert advice and to respond to the Commission's inquiries with relevant information that Council as a planning authority has provided, for example, the 35F report. And they've given the Commission their CVs outlining their experience and training in their particular field of expertise. Therefore, they're considered expert witness, not there to advocate for the position of council. We can express our view as we did in the principles. However, when we are acting as a planning authority, we are obliged to work within the Act the current policies and strategies. We have an important role in the review of all planning instruments, state policies, SPPs, LPS and land use strategies, but we need to keep within our due process. We need to follow an orderly process as set down in the Act. We are coming from a position of having to catch up with our strategic processes, and we are doing that through the LUDS process. So I object to I don't agree with the motion.
Thank you for that. Yes, Councillor Camber-Smith.
Yes, while there are elements of this that I do agree with,
Have you got your microphone on?
yeah, I mean, there are elements of this that I do, that I can agree with, but we already have a set of principles that we spent a long time discussing, through workshops and meetings, and we've conveyed those to the public and the TPC and appended them to our Section 35F report. And I'm just concerned that this motion goes beyond those principles and has the potential to try and preempt the findings of the TPC and also the land use and development process that Councillor Temby's talked about as well, that we're currently going through. I'm happy if we want to remind our consultants of the principles we agreed on, but again, as Councillor Temby said, there is a difference between whether they're speaking as technical experts or on behalf of the planning authority, and I think the the panel themselves understand that that difference, and they have asked people to make that clear, which role they're playing at any particular time. And I'm happy and quite keen for us to have a workshop in the future to discuss the process of the LUDS and the strategic plan and the finalisation of the LPS, because whilst the vision and the documents that flow from it are those of the community, how those visions are actually interpreted and turned into zoning patterns is something that councillors should be involved in. There are also principles and context around how, for instance, land is freed for population growth, as in I've been quite clear about my desire to try and free up land that's been the 16% of empty properties and 1,500 vacant lots that are in our municipality, which is way above any other municipality in Tasmania and way above the average for Australia. The LUDS, so the fact that we start carving up a load more areas into 5 hectare blocks, I think is not appropriate at all, not without having done that proper strategic work. And whether even, population growth is desirable, and that's something that the community, I haven't heard in any of the vision statements, people saying, oh yes, let's have loads and loads more people and chop the landscape up into smaller blocks. And also we need to talk about SAPs so that we have more say as a planning authority regarding the future proofing and livability of residential housing. But we need to prioritise the opportunities for local people to purchase, as opposed to people from outside the region who are the only ones who can afford at the moment the small houses on 5 acre blocks that we're talking about in rural living. So I think there's far more issues that need to be looked at throughout the LUDS process. And I think there's a certain amount of overreach in this motion, particularly things like, and there's ambiguities like the legal rural use of land. I mean, is that legal now, in the past, under the new TPS? We talk about whether the use of land is consistent with broader landscape values and does not require special zoning protection. Well, I disagree with that. I think we do need special zoning protection in certain areas. We talk about our care for the area. Well, there's plenty of examples where people haven't cared about the area, just by the very fact that we know there's huge amounts of illegal clearing that go on, etc. So I can't. Well, as I say again, while there are aspects of this I do agree with, and I do agree that there's as councillors we need to have a strong input into the LUDS process going forward. I can't, I'm afraid, support the motion. I think we'd have to let that process play out.
Thank
Thank you. Do I have anybody else to speak? Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Right.
Through you, Mayor. Just out of interest, Councillor Camber-Smith, I was going to say Jen, what would you keep and what wouldn't you keep, and is there a possibility of meeting halfway somewhere? Would you flex your rules?
I'm open to any.
Well, it'd be interesting to say that you'd support some of it. I'm interested to know which bits you would actually support and whether Councillor Jessup could sort of meet you in the middle a little bit.
I mean, I did start to, and in the end I thought it's hopeless. I'd have to rewrite it. So it's not, you know, I just don't think it's precise and succinct enough for me to support it. And I think we just have, you know, we've already voted on the Section 35F report. Yeah. We've got a process underway. I think we have to let that.
I was just curious because you were making sense and he's making sense, and I just got it all. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Temby. Is it a question? Yep.
Well, I'm actually sort of maybe making a suggestion with regards to Councillor Armstrong's question. That my recommendation would be to take out acting as a planning authority, because when we act as a planning authority, we have to actually act according to the current legislation. So if we took out acting as a planning authority and we just have council restates our commitment to the broad rural character of the Huon Valley and acknowledge the region's role in the state's economy as a leading rural LGA, and we reiterate the principles defined, I think that could be sufficient. If you start going into the further detail, there is no other agreement that's already been made. We've already had the discussion about the principles, so I would leave it as the first paragraph and take out acting as a planning authority.
A question for Councillor Temby?
Yes.
What would that achieve?
We're not acting
beyond what
as
we've already done through the Section 35F.
It's just reiterating the principles as defined.
We're not acting as a planning authority.
I think you're talking about including all the bullet points, or
no?
I was going to suggest that maybe we move as a planning authority. That was one of the questions I was going to ask.
Yeah.
But the Planning Commission is interested not in our individual councillor views or our views as councillors, but they're quite clear, in my understanding, interested in our views as a delegated planning authority, because that's the question I ask. Matt, I don't know the legal, how we work around that. If we are in some ways acting illegally by saying we're being a planning authority in this motion, I don't know. I'll leave it to your legal mind.
Through you, Mayor, it's a little bit difficult. You would have to be acting as a planning authority, so we'd have to go back into that and consider the restraints on it. Look, I just need to point out that this is strategic planning on the run, in the sense that it's talking about rural living and those sorts of things certainly weren't discussed in the 35F report to the nature that they're being discussed in the LPS now. So you would normally have to go through a strategic process. So the difficulty is how our officers present this as a view of the planning authority to the Commission in those circumstances. So it's just something to be conscious of, and I do need to give some advice on.
So
Okay.
So what is the advice, Mayor, that we should strike that planning authority statement out? Is that the advice?
No, it'd have to go back in.
Through you, Mayor, I'd be leaving it to Council whether you want it as a planning authority position or a council position. Either way, I see difficulties in how we actually present this to the Tasmanian Planning Commission, how it contradicts what Council has adopted in the 35F report in relation to representations. It makes progressing with the LPS somewhat complicated.
Mayor, if I may, I don't. There is nothing here that specifically states a planning position. I've been very careful in saying that. I take your point absolutely about the unfettered use of rural living, but I have put there that making the statement on the bottom of 46 that this will be part of the strategic process currently underway and will include consultation with existing landholders in these areas. I think we have to do that as part of our LUDS process, and that yes, I am entrapping council staff into doing that because I have heard now so many people making statements about their rural living blocks and now being not able to do what they want to do on blocks that have been clearly, and the Commissioner is quite clear in saying you can't just go and have separate rural living zones created, but if they're adjacent to existing rural living zones or clearly part of a rural living area, and the advantage of going to these workshops, I've heard now about 7 or 8 different planners give quite contradictory views to the planning consultants that we've hired. So, and I'm sure as Paul would know, planning is not a black and white game, it's a very vexed game. So I have been careful in this motion to really try to reinforce the principles that we did do, adding a little bit more specificity, but also giving the commissioners a very clear message that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because at the moment that is what's been said. So Claire is saying we're not considering any rural living at the moment, and our officer is saying, well, I disagree with the consultants. So we, the Planning Authority, are saying we're not entertaining any rural living, and as Mr Johnson said, he was quite clearly told in the hearing that we would be considering it as part of the LUDS and it would be dealt with. So I'm concerned that unless we give a very clear statement of what we are doing to the Planning Authority, we're effectively being perjured in the Planning Authority, because if we don't do this, and the Planning Authority has issued us a direction actually asking us what we're doing in the LUDS, which we haven't responded to yet, I don't believe. So they've been very inquisitorial, so they should be. So I think this will just give them a bit of comfort that we are hearing what they're saying, but also a bit of comfort to the community that we're hearing their genuine concerns about how they live in the valley. But it's all within the context of the LUDS, and I've been quite clear that the LUDS process still has to soldier on through. Okay. That's my closing statement.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think that what we need to do is go to the vote on your motion. Yep.
I was just going to say very briefly that I find this a bit confusing in what it's trying to achieve. I don't really understand it entirely, and I am concerned about councillors intervening in the process. I'd prefer to see us identifying a problem with the process and changing that than trying to influence it, I guess, which I feel that this is doing.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Temby.
Just briefly, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with the sentiment that's espoused in the motion, but we are on the path of developing a LUDS, and we've also got a history of not following due process or being held up by various. We've had the fires, we've had COVID, we've had the recruitment process. These are all things that have impacted on our, and we're starting to get back to proper due process.
I think I'm glad you clarified that, Councillor Temby, because that's a pretty broad statement to make. Yep. So I'm glad you clarified what you
the fact that we're only just starting to do the land use development strategy. I mean, that's something that could have been done. It would have been far better if it had been done before this process. And what we're trying to do now is to actually bring that back to line, but it has to be done in an orderly way, and we have to deal with the land use strategy as it stands at the moment, because that's what the legislation is, and so we have to follow what legislation is currently as part of the authority, planning authority.
Happy to remove planning, we're acting as planning authority for a second, that is happy with that, and just see council restates that. But I think the intent is still. Thank you. Look, I'm happy to remove acting as a planning authority from the motion if that reduces some of the angst, and just would read then council restates our commitment. I think for all intents and purposes it is still, putting a flag in the sand where we want to be as a community. Thank you.
There is two planning authorities.
Through you, Mayor, there is another planning authority in the second last paragraph, so that will also become the council is committed to the strategic land use study currently underway.
Well, I'm sure the planning authority is also committed to the strategic land use, but I'm happy to make it the council is committed as well.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry. Through you, Mayor. Sorry, I've always got a question. So this all started obviously because of the whole, planning scheme change and whatnot. And I think, would it be fair to say that when we all got together and thought the 35F report needed a bit of a tweak here and there, that we thought going forward that would be very good. But I think, as Mark has pointed out, there have been some issues along the way and some bumps and some discrepancies and everything else. I mean, does this motion just sort of keep it on track, if you like? That's basically what you're trying to do, isn't it? Just keep it on track and reinforce what we said in the beginning in reference to land and land use and what we want as a community. Have I sort of put that in a nutshell, Councillor Jessup?
That's a perfect note.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Yes, Councillor.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I think this goes beyond the principles that we set for the 35F, and that's what concerns me. I think it's a lot more than reiterating what we agreed. I mean, there are statements in here that I wouldn't agree with, full stop, that I don't think were included in the 35F principles. So
I think that goes to reason, I suppose, in how its interpretation too, and even some of the what you have just spoke about when you were talking about land use doesn't necessarily ring true for me either. I don't agree with you. So I mean, there's always going to be that.
but we've already put the 35F forward. We're 3/4, 7/8 of the way through the TPC hearings, and now we're saying at the 11th hour we want to change the advice that we're putting forward to them, which seems, it's preempting their deliberations, and I think they're quite capable of making decisions without our further interference.
Yes, Councillor Gibson.
I mean, I think we should just reiterate what we already wrote before. We did all the work on that.
If you turn your mic, yeah.
I think we should reiterate what we said before rather than starting down a whole new process. If we want to emphasise it, and if Councillor Jessup feels like the consultants aren't listening to that, then maybe something just to remind them that that was what we stated.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you can.
Through you, Mayor, the consultants are aware of the principles that Council has put forward. As I've stated before, 2 questions asked at this meeting, the consultants are there for their professional opinion. We certainly have somebody who's representing the Council Planning Authority, and I've advised that he's certainly been exercising that authority.
Okay, so I suppose the no other. No? We put the motion.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I have to know.
I know.
What happens if we don't actually vote on the motion and just leave it and carry it over to hold it for a discussion at a different time? Is that a possibility? Just put it out there.
There is nothing in this motion that is widely outside of our principles. What it probably does is it refines a little bit around rural living, because at the time when we were doing the work on the principles, we didn't realise how much rural living would be a topic of discussion, and how, to be honest, the consultant has a very clear view of what they think about rural living, which I think is very clearly different to the majority of the people on this planning authority. And with respect, I think the council officers are largely being asked at the end of the discussion with the consultant, and they're largely agreeing with that. And they're in a very difficult position because they have no more specific guidance from us of what to say one way or the other. So in that sense, it really is just honing some stuff. Look, I think it's useful for representatives to hear the voice of council because they will be able to refer to this in their own representations. If we leave it too late, the dust will be settled, and we're not at the 11th hour. We're only at about the 0.66 hour of the process, and the commissioners have been very clear is that they will ponder and deliberate and look at the big picture, and they're not making a decision on the day. They're talking about, December before we get an answer. So I think while there is time to run in their mind, I would like representatives to hear that we are on their side.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, they can tell us to.
Okay. Yep. Right. Okay. All right. I'm going to put forward the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Yes, the amended motion without the planning authority. Yes. That's Doyle, Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Temby and Burgess. And those against are Councillor Gibson and Councillor Camber-Smith. And the motion is carried. The next motion is from Councillor Camber-Smith. Councillor Camber-Smith, are you happy to move the motion as included in the report?
Yes. Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Camber-Smith, would you like to talk to your motion?
Thank you. This motion is to request that Council seeks funding for an integrated transport study for getting around the Huon Valley and the Kingborough municipalities and into and out of Hobart City, and requests that the General Manager meet with the interested parties, which is Kingborough, City of Hobart, Council, State Growth, and the STCA, potentially UTAS, to notify them of this resolution and to find a way forward in terms of agreeing each party's contribution to and role in the project. The study would include an analysis of today's transport picture, a template of what a model integrated transport system would look like for our area, how much it would cost to establish and operate, a recommended implementation plan and timetable, and the estimated benefits to community and the economy to be progressed in the financial year 23-24, and following completion, the study's findings to be put to State Growth to attempt to elicit funding to actually run a pilot for this region. So I wanted to sort of remind us that we unanimously agreed a motion in the 21st of January that was came out of the AGM, which was in response to resolutions, the Council resolves to consider funding for public transport planning, including risk assessment through the 23-24 budget setting process. And also to say this motion doesn't seek to commit Huon Valley Council itself to providing funding, but rather to bring in the interested parties together to seek funding and progress the study. Many discussions have been held now with Kingborough and City of Hobart councillors and officers, federal and state MPs, UTAS and State Growth, and it shows there's a real appetite for progressing a study of this type, and that could form a template for seeking further money from State Growth to fund a pilot integrated transport project for the area, which could inform transport strategy for the rest of Tasmania. While I recognise it's not Council's role to provide public transport, we can and we should advocate for and facilitate the provision of better transport solutions for our residents, and the vision and the draft land use development strategy discussion, land use and development strategy discussion paper urges us to take on that responsibility. And in that way, we can meet many of our community's objectives for the region, including a stronger and more connected community, more options for young people to access education, work and the social sphere, and a stronger economy. There's been a number of comments that have come in on the draft community vision, and some of these include there needs to be much better public transport, more regular between Cygnet and Huonville, also much better transport between Cygnet and Kingston and Hobart. A lot of medical requirements are only in Kingston or Hobart, and the bus service from Cygnet to Kingston and Hobart is inadequate. People asking for additional means to travel in and around the community other than by car, by having more accessible public transport. Lack of public transport, particularly for people on the Cygnet side, public transport and direct access to local produce. So those are just five comments that have come in out of the 43 new comments I think we had on the draft community vision. So that's a fair percentage of people, raising public transport without any prompting of our own. In the draft land use and development discussion paper, it talks about transport mobility and access to transport options being key to improving connectivity and providing easier access to services. It says Huon Valley is very car dependent, and there's an opportunity for council to advocate for enhanced public transport, and we need to improve transport connections, both public and active, between sub-areas and in connecting regions to increase access to services. The work has largely been done. It's more. All the groundwork has been laid. There's a clear community need. There's a clear benefit to improved connectivity and transport. All it's requiring really is council to say yes. We think this is a good idea, and just getting the parties together to talk about the way forward. I've spoken a few times now to State Growth. They see this, they won't commit, of course, to me, because I'm not approaching them as council, as a councillor, but they can see this fitting into their, way of thinking. They're realising they are having to provide, they do need to provide many more transport options, and just having sort of fixed route buses with limited flexibility and are just not optimal, especially with all the various things that are now happening. If we've got Transformer down here, that's going to be, we're talking about 30,000 more visitors a year. We've got the Macquarie Stadium, that's also going to attract a lot more traffic to and from the regions and into Hobart. So, the time seems right for progressing something of this nature.
Thank you. It does state there, though, that you want council to seek the funding. So they're...
seek the funding, yes, not to provide it.
No,
yeah.
but so there is a job there for council.
Indeed, yes, but to do that with other parties, not just on its own. So
Okay.
I sort of envisaged that we would bring together these people to sort of set up a sort of reference group and then determine who's lobbying who and whatever however we progress that. And there is the Growing Better Regions grant out at the moment, and this would seem to be entirely appropriate to fit into that programme.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Gibson.
Just with regards to that, can I just ask the question then? Should it be that first part A? Should it be the other way around, so that Huon Valley is working with Kingborough and together we seek funding for the $50,000 integrated transport study, rather than council doing it on their own?
Perfectly happy with that. Yep, that makes sense.
Could we amend that? And I guess just while I'm talking, are we committed to working with all levels of government, community, business and experts in taking action on climate change, including mitigation and adaptation policies? This is one. This is an initiative around climate change that, 30% of our climate emissions are in transport, and we've just got to change the way we do transport. We need transport systems that suit less affluent residents. I think that's really important. And the cost of building roads and bigger roads and having more cars, well, it's building very bigger roads is all predicated on more and more private cars, and it's just we've just got to be heading the other way. And the other thing about this motion that I think is really important now is that we need to plan into the future. So even if we're not changing things right now, we do need to have a plan in place so that corridors are in place, so that park and ride facilities are known where they're going to be, and that space gets maintained. Nodes for bus interchanges. There's a whole myriad of things which this sort of strategy will throw up and allow us to plan into the future for.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Jessup.
Thank you. I'm really uplifted by Councillor Chambers-Smith's support for the AFL Stadium. It's great. I'll make a mental note of that one. Governments love making grandiose statements about underground bus moors in the city, and I've heard all of that before. And it was said to me recently that the community vision document is about us stating the vision of the community so we can go forward and lobby government and force government to do things. And I note that, that the townships within the Huon Valley are well connected through improved active transport, public transport links and quality local and state roads. So again, that's talking about transport. The Health and Wellbeing Committee is regularly talking about the disengagement of youth and the loneliness of aged people in our community and the lack of connection and stuff. I note that we're not necessarily coughing up any of this money, but we may have to cough up a bit, but that'll be a supplementary budget bid, I'm sure. But I think I support this motion because I think it's timely to do it as part of the LUDs, because effective land use is about effective transport as well. So if we've got high density housing in the middle of Huonville with no car spaces, they're going to be islands without good public transport and things like that. So thank you, Jenny. I'm happy to support that motion.
Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Lynn. I also support the motion, and I believe that it's in keeping with our strategic planning directions, to inform our strategic planning directions, and also it would be a really good example of what Minister Street is advocating for with regards to the future of local government review, and that is where state growth, Hobart, Kingborough and the Huon Valley as a community of interest have in their interest for the community better transport infrastructure. It's been identified way back in 2019 with the Huonville-Ranelagh Master Plan, and it talks about if key directions and recommended actions are not implemented or only partly implemented, this may lead to poor strategic land use planning, development and amenity outcomes, and that calls for a transport study to be done. And so there's also the, unfortunately, Council's agreed key priority in the Ranelagh strategy is a transport management study, and that hasn't been actioned by Council yet. As both Councillor Jessup and Chambers-Smith has said, getting around in theme in Community Vision says it's safe and easy to move around the townships. There is good public transport between the townships. The discussion points of the State of the Valley by SGS Economics and Planning says Huon Valley is one of Tasmania's fastest growing LGAs in Tasmania. Transport and public transport infrastructure were identified by residents as the equal third biggest issue facing the Huon Valley. And it talks about the bus links, and so I think there's a really big argument to actually go ahead and proceed with this. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe?
Yeah, I just had one question, probably for the General Manager through you, Mayor, on the comments that Council don't operate public transport. I was just wondering what already happens between, and if anything already happens between these three municipal areas on talking about issues like public transport?
Yeah, look, I think I just want to reiterate that we are not resourced to undertake the level of activity that's proposed in this motion. So coming back to the question about one of the other actions not being progressed, this is largely the same issue. Like the same person is going to be leading this if we are sort of talking about what's been done. We've been working and having some conversations with Circular Economy Huon, and in a sense of listening, understanding, and certainly coming back to Councillor Canberra-Smith's point, advocacy, have no issue about the advocacy. I think the part that troubles management is when we start talking about going and meeting and then also agreeing on parties' contributions and role in the project. So we do not have any resource to be leading public transport projects. And so if we are sitting around going, yep, we're all on board, then what we need is resource to be able to progress this. Because otherwise we are just contributing to the workload issue that we're all very conscious of. Does that answer your question? Or?
Not really. Is there already any established conversations happening between the three municipal areas on public transport?
So through Circular Economy Huon, we have had some conversations with Kingborough. The last conversation we had with them is they didn't have it in their budget and didn't have the resource to progress it. They have an integrated transport plan that has largely been not updated after several bids in their budget process. So I don't know what's actually gone through in their budget, obviously, but when we spoke to their representative, who was one of the directors, he basically noted that he didn't foresee that they would have any funds to contribute to this process. So our conversation at the last meeting was, we're happy to be an advocate, we're happy to talk to council, writing to the department and noting that it is a valuable piece of work, but we don't have any resource to be able to support it.
Yes, Councillor Canberra-Smith. Yeah, thank you. I mean, just in answer to that point, I perfectly take the point of the lack of resource. My distinct feeling from talking to State Growth is that they want to see that there is, a commitment to this from councils, not necessarily in terms of putting in resource, but a commitment to wanting this to happen. And just the fact that we could send a letter between the three councils would carry so much more weight. And this is why I wanted to put this motion up, just to, get us to actually, come together, talk to, David Reeve and Caden and all the other people at Hobart City Council. And Hobart City Council are extremely keen on this, and they've already committed money in their budget to it. So I think the very fact that, we might only have to do very limited amount of work here, and I would envisage State Growth leading this, project managing it. I can't for a moment imagine that it would be a council-led project. It's just it's the council giving the momentum and showing this is what we want, and maybe just signing a memorandum of agreement between the three councils. Yes, we're all keen on this. We're all going to put a letter to State Growth. We're going to push for it. We're going to lobby it. State Growth to run it, and that it's to give that push.
Can I just put one little thing in there? Is that, and I know you've said you've rang State Growth as Jenny. You must always remember that you are a councillor. It does muddy the waters a little bit when the directors then have to make their connections, because we've already spoken to Huon Valley Council. So we have to be careful. Hobart City Council have got a lot more resources than what we have down here. And I agree, they do some great things. And they are through the STCA as well. They are funding things that to help because they have got the resource and they have got the manpower to be able to do it. I know from trying to get State Growth to come down here and talk about things that we already want to talk about, hence a reply to the road safety, hence our wanting to meet with them and talk about strategic things to do with when we've had floods or when we've had whatever. It just doesn't happen as easy as saying, somebody in a department saying that it would happen if this came from a council, because we do things through the council and we do try regularly to make appointments to and get them to come down.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's a reason not to try, though.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Temmie.
Thank you, Mayor. So I understand the resourcing issue, and that's perhaps the direction that we should be taking is a letter to, again, Minister Street. As I said, this is an opportunity for us to actually demonstrate that we don't have to amalgamate or anything like that. We can actually work as a community of interest productively, constructively, and for the economic development of the area. It's not just, I mean, obviously there is a lot of community and social benefits of encouraging better transport, but there's a lot of economic development opportunities there too. I mean, it is a constraint. So therefore, if there are any staffing issues, I believe there is no more important issue for economic development to actually take on something like this. So I think it's a very high priority. It's a basic need to actually be able to move from one place to another. And there's young people that can't get around for job interviews or for education, and there are older people that can't, movements from getting to medical appointments, as Councillor Camber-Smith mentioned. So I think there's a lot of good reasons that we could actually involve perhaps economic development staff to actually progress this with the funding of the state government. And that will have to come through the leadership of someone like Minister Street, instructing the state government to work with the three councils for the benefit, the community of interest that they're espousing.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Mayor. It does sound like a good idea on paper, and I know that we talked about it, but we have actually had studies done before, not through council, like independent studies of bus companies. They've actually done studies, and we have had buses on routes that no longer exist because of the lack of interest. It has to be viable for bus companies, for instance, to go to Dover and through Oyster Cove and around those sorts of things. And I wonder because obviously this report is going to come back that, we need more transport for elderly down Dover Way, and we need more people.
If I can just clarify, this is very different to the sort of thing that a fixed route bus transport company would do. Talking about integrated transport, you're leveraging technology. Now there's companies like Lift and Go and Via and other data analytics companies that are specialising in logistics and transport. They're not talking about just a fixed route bus route between Kingston, Sandfly. They're talking about they will actually they use their models to pull all the transport data, all the various journeys that are being done, all the unmet transport needs, and their models will tell you how all those unmet transport needs can be met usually well within the same budget that fixed route transport's been provided for. So that's a mixture of on-demand vehicles, private hire vehicles. So, like Uber, but Uber with sort of, mini buses. So, people just, and it's all integrated, all your ticketing, all your routing and everything is, you just look it up or you ring up and they tell you, yeah, we'll pick you up at X, drop you off at X, because the biggest problem, if anybody, say, in the top of Mountain River or top of Crabtree or down in Dover, if they want to go, say, to the mainland or somewhere, or even to the other side of the Eastern Shore without a car, their biggest problem is getting from the house to the bus station. And it's those sorts of linkages that are hugely missing from fixed route bus transport, and this is why this is such a different concept. And it's over the last 10 years, the whole technology and the models that they use to do this has come on leaps and bounds. It's called mobility as a service, and that's why I tried to sort of give you some of the examples in the background information about how this works. It's an order of magnitude different to the standard old, boring old, fixed route bus where you've got to try and cycle or get to the...
Well, I was going to continue on
I'm sorry.
with that.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I just wanted to...
I was just using that as an example of a study. Yes, I was going to digress to the part that you just went to just then.
Sorry.
And of course, we've had Uber and we've had taxis and we've had all these sorts of things very similar to what you're saying. And I get that it's all very technological and it's all very good, but we are so different to Kingborough and Hobart. Our demographic is so different. I imagine that it's going to come back the model that would not be profitable. They would not be able to make it the same as what we have now. It's not, we're not close to anything.
But buses are subsidised now. They're
not
not
buses.
profitable.
I'm talking about integrated transport, like you were saying, like Uber-like things with booking and whatnot. I mean, it sounds good, but at the end of the day, we are the A end of the world in comparison to the proximity that these people would be utilising, this sort of transport option in Kingborough and Hobart.
And that's why I gave you examples from like Lincolnshire in England and places like that where it's a dispersed population.
So I do just wonder though, it wouldn't, there's no harm in doing it, I know, but is the outcome, with the foresight of knowing where we live and the demographic and how we're so different, I don't think the outcome would be as good for us as it would be for Kingborough and Hobart.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point, that it would, because it analyses the unmet needs, tells you how you provide them, how you do it cost effectively.
But we know what the unmet needs are. That's what we've talked about. We know what the problems are, but we can't fix it
we don't know.
Okay, guys, we're not not across the table debating.
Okay, well, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've just got one question to ask Councillor Temby. How does this become economic development?
So obviously the movement of people provides opportunity for them to gain employment or education, for example. If they have greater access to education, then they have the opportunity for, again, employment. You also have the movement of vehicles between Hobart, Kingborough and the Huon Valley and return. So these are all aspects that can be considered within an integrated transport strategy. You can also look at opportunities for active transport, and that can actually help economic development as well, because again, you're looking at attracting people to the area. Tourism, if it's more conducive to active transport, it would be more conducive for tourism. It could be a carbon emissions type thing. So I think that there is a lot of connections with commercial transport as well. The movement of commercial vehicles throughout, because at the moment, there are a lot of drivers that are finding it very difficult moving conducting business within the area, getting from one area to the next. So these things could be all considered.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor.
I just have closing remarks that I do have a few concerns on this motion. I think there's a lot of assumption that all these parties are already supporting the contents of this, and they haven't. To notify them of this resolution, agree each party's contribution to and role in this project, I think is a big assumption that the STCA and these other councils and state growth are already supportive of this sort of initiative, which I think is wrong to make that assumption. And I also question the timing. There's a lot happening at the moment.
Yeah.
And I agree with the General Manager's comments that putting more strain on the things that we already have wheels on the ground doing is just going to make them, those things that we need to have done well, more strained, in my opinion. So I don't think I'm going to support this motion.
Can we get it for free?
So, what I'm going to do is, have you got a close? Yes, I was coming to you to close.
Oh, sorry. I thought there was more, sorry. If we don't do this, we have to do it as part of the LUDs. There's no getting away from looking at transport. We can't have the sort of population growth that we're anticipating in the LUDs at the moment and have them all driving around in private cars continually and expect not to have congestion and to have livable cities and to have all our youth being able to do the things they want to do, our old people want to be able to do the things they want to do, people be able to go to get to college and different sorts of educational opportunities and work interviews, etc. It simply won't happen. I mean, I've been here 20 years, and the traffic has just, it's an order of magnitude more than it was when we were here, and it's only going to get worse. Something has to give, and this is a way of, a cheap way of progressing that. And whether we roll it into the LUDs or whether we do it through this motion, I don't mind, but it will have to happen. We can't ignore the fact that people have to have mobility. And we've been asking the community, what do you want, what do you need, what do you want out of the LUDs, what do you want out of the strategic plan? We ask all these questions, they come back and they tell us all these things. We want transport, we want mobility, we want connectivity. So we have to take that on board. It's not an option. We've got to do something, and this is a way of doing it in a way that shares that cost, or perhaps we don't have to, hopefully we wouldn't have to pay anything at all because state growth will fund it or the STCA will fund it. We don't know who. I mean, maybe nobody will fund it. But if we don't try, we'll never know, and we'll never know what the results are, and we'll have missed that opportunity. And I think that would be a terrible shame for our community.
Thank you very much for that. All right, well, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Gibson, Canberra Smith, Burgess, Jessup and Temby. And against is Councillor Doyle, Thorpe, and Councillor Armstrong didn't vote.
No, I'm abstaining. I know it's a no, but I'm still abstaining. Half of me wants to say yes.
I know. I know. That's fine. Thank you.
Now that has been passed, we will need to be able to... I'll have to sit with the General Manager and find the resource to be able to put that in. So please don't ask me to have it done by tomorrow.
Just a clarification, did we reorder that first paragraph? Yeah, great.
Okay. Agenda number 15.020/23, Yuan Valley Community Vision. I refer the councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move the motion, please? Councillor Jessup and seconder Councillor Temby. Councillor Jessup, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. In my summing, later I may add some amendments. Point E, which would be with the following amendments. So I'd like to hear what people have if they've got any particular amendments they'd like to do. But look, I commend this project to the councillors. I know there's been a lot of staff time has gone into it. A lot of work has gone into it. And I think it's actually not... There's tweaking, and I'll get to the tweaks, but it is actually not a bad overall representation, I think, of what people were saying, and it does give us... Huh? No, tweeting. No, Donald's later. But no, I commend it to councillors, but as I said, I would foreshadow that I'll add D, which is with the following amendments. Mayor, I'm happy to talk about my amendments now, or I'm happy to seek a general discussion, and they're only minor. They're only minor.
It's appropriate.
Okay.
It's appropriate to do it now.
Okay. So, starting on page 1. No. Only kidding, Mayor. Okay, so look, there's 5 broad comments I'd like to make. All the councillors know about my robust dislike of the survey, and I wouldn't have anything go out under my stamp that said it's a statistically robust survey. It's not, it's a convenient sample. And Matt, I'll actually send you this email, and I'll just go into my sent and read it. So all I'm saying there is that early on in the document it says a survey, 720 plus responses from a cross-section of the community. It's a convenient sample, it's not statistically robust. Home for everyone, so I'm really just wanting to hone in a little bit on part 3, the community vision. So at the moment it says innovative housing solutions are encouraged while respecting heritage and neighbourhood character. I'd like to change that because planning was regularly commented in the comments, and I'd like to change that to an approach to planning and land that allows and encourages innovative housing solutions while respecting lifestyle, nature, culture, heritage and neighbourhood character. So not massively changing it, but just putting a bit more focus. Because I had a discussion with Matt and acknowledge that this is a higher level document that we're not necessarily committing to, that we're using it as a bit of a bat to corral some politicians and people like that. But I think members of the community will look at this and go, okay, this is what our council's willing to fight for. So for a little bit airy-fairy, it may give people the wrong impression of what we're doing. And this is relevant to my next point. So health and wellbeing. It currently says the Huon Valley has access to affordable health services for all, health and wellbeing, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just changing that. I think we very quickly emphasise health as in GP services, and we get ourselves into a great quandary over that. But certainly sitting on the welfare and health committee, as Lyle would by all means chip in, Lyle, if you want to. But yeah, we were having a long discussion about ACATs at the last meeting, about getting aged care services for people and getting... So it's not... Yeah, health and wellbeing is just not about being able to get to see a cheap GP. So I'm suggesting there that we say the Huon Valley has fair and equitable access to all government services, including access to affordable health services. And then the next line as it sits. Food security is the last one, food production and security. I think we need to be careful that we don't just see agriculture, which has a very specific zoning intent, as in large-scale agriculture, and aquaculture is the only rural production that we do here. In actual fact, I think that's quite a misnomer. So the Huon Valley is seen as a leader in sustainable farming and commercial agriculture and aquaculture, providing access to local blah, blah, blah. So just broadening it a little bit. So they're my main comments. And there's a few editorial stuff, Matt, that I won't bother because I'll be picked up in the thing. But a comment was made to me by somebody that we talk a lot about the Huon River, and do we actually mean access to our waterways and the Huon River? Because I think there's more than just the Huon River. So I don't know if you can make a mental note of that, Matt. And also figure 1 is just a really not well-designed graph. And I'm suggesting that if we want to be able to compare the survey results to the community, we need the 2 bars sitting side by side on the one graph. But that's what I'd tell my second-year market research students, and I'll keep it at that. But look, they're my main... It's really only the first 5 points that I'd like to put into the motion as part E.
Through you, Mayor, just for the purpose of including the amendments, it really just needs to be Part B, which is the Huon Valley Community Vision, included as attachment A to this report is received with the following amendments and having those highlighted.
Yep. That's it. But apart from that, I think it's a useful document and will help us go forward.
Does the seconder have to, yeah, who was that? Kathy. Kathy did. Kathy, do you accept Councillor Jessop's?
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder with, so I guess I want to confirm that this is not changing the intent of the community's information that they've given to us, and also the first point, a home for everyone, an approach to planning and land that allows and encourages sustainable housing solutions, perhaps.
I'm certainly happy to add sustainable. Innovative was also there, like tiny houses and stuff.
I think that's what the meaning of what they were saying. But anyway, can we include sustainable?
I'm happy to add.
It just adds clarity.
So I think both. I think there were issues, and I've read all of it, and there certainly were comments. Look, I've certainly read all of it, and there were both quite clear comments about sustainability, and that's land use as well as size of blocks and things like that. But also there was a lot in there about innovative housing, tiny homes and all that sort of stuff. So I think both are there. And I certainly haven't done anything that I think is outside of the intent of the many, many comments. And look, it was a massive response from the community, and we should be very proud of that.
I'm happy to accept that with that slight change, and I agree that it was a really good response from the community, and I really appreciate the work that's gone into it, and thank particularly Lisa and Ron, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anyone to speak against this?
Can I just ask a question? I can't, the food productivity and security, the wording of that, I mean, I would have thought something very simple, like Huon Valley seen as a leader in food production, providing access to local food, employment and economic benefits, rather than sort of trying to separate out, you know, what did you have? Farming, agriculture, aquaculture? Just stick to the point of being a leader in food production and local food production. That's what I mostly heard.
Yeah, and look, I think there's a good. There was a good discussion about the range of stuff that we do, and this has been coming through the LPS stuff as well. We've had all levels of farming producers, from the guy with a hectare of market garden to a guy with 500 acres of apples, and part of the economic point, we, as I now quote this figure regularly, we produce 83% of Tasmania's apples. We produce 4% of our agricultural production on only 1% of the agricultural land. So I think it is a mix, and I don't just want to. I do want to keep the concept of farming in there, because I think that was one of the things that people did want to talk about. It's just not just the food, but it's about the fact it's farmed here and grown here, and so I probably wouldn't. Happy for you to move that as an amendment to the amendment if you want, but I'm not happy to accept that too narrow a view. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. What about the Huon Valley is seen as a leader in farming and a range of local food production and access to local produce?
I think it's actually the sentiment was as much about how it's produced, and I know that aquaculture's contentious and large-scale agriculture is contentious, but it is very much part of who we are, and I think it was talked about as part of the vision for people. Yeah, I think I get where you're coming from, Paul, but I'm probably not going to agree with him.
So did the aquaculture, was that mentioned? And
I don't
Yeah,
think
there were
I didn't
there were
notice that
comments,
come
and
through.
the school kids mentioned a bit in some of that, and yeah, I suppose the reality is it employs a lot of people, and I think part of the vision is about working with those organisations to help them to become more sustainable, and I think if we pretend they're not there, we just give them a licence to do what they want.
Isn't it a subset of sustainable farming? Isn't aquaculture a subset of farming, sustainable farming?
Yeah, but I suppose, look, it's a big footprint of that space. So yeah.
But it's not just that. There is other
There's
aquacultures.
oysters, there's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
there's,
we've got quite a lot.
Deep sea fishing.
But it's whether it's reflective of what was said in the vision that's important.
that's the question.
And that's the
Yeah,
quick
I
question.
thought it
I'm
was
not
through the
certain
word.
that it was.
Can I just clarify through you, Mayor? This isn't an addition that Councillor Jessup is putting in. It's already in the draft as it's been presented to you.
Oh yes, sorry, yes.
Say again.
So the wording that is in there says the Huon Valley is seen as a leader in sustainable agriculture and aquaculture, providing access to local produce, employment,
It's already
economics and
there.
benefits.
Oh, I see.
I'm actually trying to stretch it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just adding the yellow bits.
I'm just
Yeah,
adding
okay.
more,
Alright. Fair enough.
the market gardeners and
Yep.
small scale beef producers and all those sort of important people.
Okay.
Good to add.
Thank you.
Do I have any other comment or questions? Or
I guess I had a question, just with these sorts of visions, I'm always concerned to make it as pithy and real as possible. And I noticed quite a few comments about it being not wanting it to be just talk and not wanting it to be action based. And I think that precision of being precise on your vision is actually where you get action. So, I mean, it's not really for us to write the vision, but I would encourage the vision to be more succinct. I think you can't cover everything. If you cover everything, you're not covering anything. So I quite like the breakdown, but the initial, I don't know. It just, it's, no, the overall community vision statement. I think it could be tightened up.
I think they did tighten it quite a bit.
They have. Yes, that's true.
all right. Do I have any other?
So
Yes.
just in closing,
Yes.
Mayor, I'm getting in quickly. Look, again, no vision is perfect, obviously, but what we do with it, and I think there's enough here that we can all hang a bit of passion projects and work off it.
Fair
But look, I would also like to congratulate Rong, fairly new to the Valley. He worked his little socks off. He even got his kid out to do work, and Lisa as well. They listened to us. They added extra workshops in their own weekends and own time and stuff like that. And to Matt, for the leadership of this work. We've got to make it work, obviously, now, but that's another issue. But, congratulations to staff, and I commend the report.
Thank you. All right. Well, if that's the case, I'll ask that the amended motion.
The motion is highlighted with amendments.
Yep. That the motion that's highlighted with amendments, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Okay. Agenda item number 16.008/23, the financial report. I refer the councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Yep, Councillor Armstrong, and a seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Armstrong, have you got? Anything you'd like to say on this?
Should I string it out a bit? No, I won't string it out. So the budget was probably the most stressful thing I've ever had to do in my whole entire life, and I actually broke a tooth grinding teeth over this. It was a really difficult year to try and get a budget, and I'm sure that there's going to be people that are going to be upset. There's going to be other people that will be happy. Oh, we're not doing the financial report. I mean, are we not doing the budget? Well, in that case, that will be my next motion. I am actually looking at this. So what time is it? Yes, it's coffee time. No, the financial report looks fine. No, nothing.
Yes, Councillor Temby.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Point number 20, last paragraph. Council incurred costs to date of $359,889 in relation to the severe flash flooding event in August. Under the National Disaster Relief to Local Government Policy, arrangements, the Council will receive disaster assistance funding for eligible activities. The claim is currently waiting for audit from the Tasmanian Audit Office.
That's correct.
Can a letter be sent to the Tasmanian Audit Office to find out what the delay is and when we can expect payment?
I'll put that through to David, but I know what the answer's going to be. But anyway, through to you, Director.
Mayor, I can advise that this audit is now in actual fact underway, so they've managed to find some resources and get to it a little bit sooner than they initially told us, so good news.
Thank you, David.
They are very under-resourced at the Audit Office.
We seem to be hearing that about everything.
Though.
Yeah, I know.
Everywhere.
I know. But
it doesn't matter.
All the more reason we need to start asking questions. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions of the budget? Of the budget?
No, we're not doing the budget.
Of the financial report?
No, but I did find the right thing that I was supposed to be looking at. But no, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So no closing? No, thank you. Okay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 16.009/23, adoption of fees and charges for the 2023-24 financial year. I refer the councillors to the recommendation. Do you want me to read it out? Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Yes. Councillor Camber-Smith. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Camber-Smith, do you wish to speak to this motion?
I know I'm not going to be popular, but
That's okay, I wasn't either. So.
I just have a couple of changes I would like to suggest, and some of these I have put forward before, but I thought I'd give it another try.
So you're moving
an amendment,
right? No? Yep.
Moving a motion.
Yep.
I'm moving a motion with amendments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I would like to see some of the dog fees and charges put up by the same 8.3% as we're proposing for most of the other ones. I've just got to find the actual place where I put them all. But it was the hunting dogs, the breeders, dangerous dogs, the seizing and confining, all the ones I've highlighted in yellow in the email I sent to David. Do you want me to do one at a time or go for them all at once, or?
All at once.
All at once.
We've already got an email, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. As I've suggested previously, I think the permitted and discretionary fees for residences should be scaled according to the size of the property being built, as in floor area or value, as per the scale we've got for other use and or development on page 8. And I think it should start at a much lower rate for a tiny home. I mean, I know we've got the 50% discount to first home buyers, builders, but planning costs, if it's the user pays and it needs to reflect ability to pay, and if somebody's only got enough money to build a little tiny house, then I think the fee for the planning should reflect that. Up to, you know, a sort of a 10 million property could be rather more. And if we scaled it in the same way as we've already got for other use and or development, then it doesn't seem like there'd be a lot more work involved in doing that.
Is that it then? The ones that you had highlighted in your email?
There was a couple of others. I thought change of use, particularly to a commercial venture such as short stay accommodation, ought to go up by the same rate as the other development applications. I'm not sure why that's excluded. And also for where we have to take infrastructure over by council, we've got a sort of flat rate there. And I don't understand why that wouldn't be scaled as well, because if we're taking over, you know, a huge amount of curb and channel and on stormwater and road, as opposed to maybe, you know, someone's small crossover, or whatever it is, then I think that should be scaled as well in exactly the same way as the, you know, the other use and or development. And the application for a building change of use to a commercial venture such as short stay accommodation should go up by the same rate as the other development applications. So those are my suggestions.
So they're amendments to the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Thorpe, do you agree with, or do you want to still second that motion?
No, I don't agree, so I'd withdraw the seconding of that motion.
Okay. So do I have a seconder to Councillor Canberra-Smith's motion amendments?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that for discussion.
Yep.
Could we ask for the director's sort of response on?
Yeah, but once we get, now that we know what he's responding to, through you, General Manager, to the Director, if that's okay.
Mayor, if I can... Oh.
Well, okay, we won't.
Can I... Oh.
Yes, I'll go down to you, Councillor Best.
The next procedure is Councillor Jenny Smith spoke for it. Yeah. So somebody's about to speak against it now, is that correct?
Disqualified.
Can I speak against the motion?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so unfortunately I missed the workshop we had on this.
Just hang on a moment. Are you voting against the motion amendments that?
Yeah, I'm speaking against it.
Yeah, against them, against Jenny's amendments.
Yes.
Yes, cool. That's lovely. Yep.
Okay. I did try to catch up. I watched the tape. I had an appointment to see David, and I also asked another question. And I'd just like to mention what I think's the elephant in the room. I mean, 144% increase in one foul swoop is just, I find it astronomical. I find it a real impost on the ratepayers that they're going to be faced with that if that gets passed tonight. And we're probably at the highest rate of household stress we've ever been under. There's no reason why that won't increase and get worse. And I've done some comparisons here. Somebody's done this for me. We've gone and looked at Sorell, Kingborough and Hobart. and I asked the question whether we were comparable with our rates, and more or less told that we were. Now, Sorell and Kingborough are both around about $500. This is for discretionary dwelling, which is a basic one we should look at. And Huon Valley is about $720, so, and Hobart $1,200. So we're in the ballpark. That's pretty good. If we go ahead and pass 144%, Huon Valley comes up to 1,760. Now we're only, I haven't been able to ascertain really where the evidence came from to justify 144%. All I've heard is that we must do that so that user pays, and that's the figure we've come up with. Now, we didn't get to this stage overnight where we obviously must be losing so much money through planning, but it seems like we want to fix it all in one foul swoop, which I find to be very unfair towards the ratepayers and anyone that wants to develop or build anything in the Huon Valley. And I'd like to put an alternative motion if I could. Can I do that now?
Could I just answer, just briefly, because by scaling the fees, as I've suggested, it would mean it does come more back to an ability to pay. So somebody who just wants a tiny house might pay $500, whereas somebody who wants to build a 200 square metre house would pay more like the 1,600. Somebody who wants to build, so that would be fairer. I've tried to make it.
It might be fairer for the little houses. It's not fairer for the bigger houses or any developer that wants to come in.
Except the big properties do take a lot more effort on our.
Yeah, of course, and I agree that we should move towards it, but to move towards it in one foul swoop, I just think, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's probably quite rude. You know, if we pass that tonight, it's in the UN News next week that, yep, rates are up 144%, and I think it would have been a much more sensible approach if we actually did it in steps, at least give the public some warning that we're going to end up at 144%, but if we're going to do it, why don't we just do it in steps?
Councillor Temby had...
Can I just have a point of clarification?
Just wait. Yep, thank you. Yes, Councillor Temby.
I just was going to point out that we are in a situation where it's a demand and supply. We've got a big demand for building in the Huon Valley, and we only have a limited amount of area. And also what the purpose is to actually start to claw back towards redeeming some of the costs involved. So the problem has been that it's been underfunded in the past, and so this is actually trying to bring it back to a little bit towards contributing towards the costs. So it's more of a user pay situation. So that was the reasoning behind the discussion, and I do like the idea of a little bit more of a staged approach. I think that could perhaps alleviate some of the problems. But yeah, that's all.
Yes, Councillor Gibson.
Councillor Burgess mentioned 144% increase in rates, and I think we need to be very clear on where it's rates and where it's fees.
Charges, sorry.
Yeah, and that increase in rates is actually fees is designed to relieve, to take stress off rates. So to move it towards, you know, when developers want to do something, and as a percentage of the total cost of development, it's still not a lot. I mean, it is an increase, but it's taking that expense out of general rates and putting it into fees, as I understand it.
Yes, Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would like to speak against the motion. Partly because we did have this discussion at some length, and we did make a commitment to look at doing a complete reassessment of rates and charges. And I don't disagree with the sliding scale of some development work and looking at, you know, how we charge tiny houses versus McMansions and stuff. I'm glad we're not putting rates up by 144%. But Yeah, I think the other discussion that we have been having is around, and this has been led a bit like by the officers, to look at our efficiency within the planning department, and we're talking about IT solutions and things like that. So I would genuinely hope that if we bring some of those things in and make some of those changes, next year we might be able to even drop the rate a little bit, because it needs to be user pay, not fleecing because the housing market's hot, and we're not doing that. But I think we need to make it market or cost based. It will certainly, because I think from memory we were subsidising planning fees by $500,000 or something like that, which is a lot of rates for everybody. And look, we weren't totally heartless, because we did, Councillor O'Neill did put a very strong case around first home buyers, and we actually, I think from memory, there's a 50% rebate for people on the first home buyer scheme. But yeah, based on my little market research that I did today, and this isn't an excuse at one level, but the people who are moving into the Huon to buy and build are generally not first home, but there's a lot of second, third, fourth home buyers, a lot of people opening up capital from moving interstate and moving here. So I think it's fair that individuals pay for what they receive. In terms of the other fees and charges, look, I think we went through them. I'm a little bit beastly careless about dog fees going up by the 8%, but I do, that's not a large revenue raiser in itself, a lot of families have dogs, so we're sort of there. But we have tried to be fair, and where we want to change behaviour around rubbish, we've actually managed how we raise charges, so it wasn't just let's put everything up by 8%. That we spent 3.5 hours, I think it was, chewing over each one of these lines. So I think I'm not supportive of the amended motion.
Okay. So what we have now is the amendments that have been made to the motion by Jenny and seconded by Paul. Jenny, have you got anything more you'd...
Mayor, I'd like to actually, I think point of clarification is the motion we have is Jenny's move motion, so I'd like to move an amendment to revert back to the motion as prepared and presented in the reports.
Okay, so do I have a seconder for that?
Doesn't it have to be voted on before it can revert back?
Through you, Mayor, it will be, because it's being moved as an amendment.
Okay. I'm confused now. I did. Oh, I see. Okay. Gosh.
Okay, so now we'll vote on the amended motion. Is that as read in the document? Is that correct? Yes. Okay. All those in favour of the amended motion to go back to the original, please raise your hands. That's Councillor Doyle, Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Temby. It's all of us. Yep. So carried, and the motion. The amendment becomes a motion, and then I go back to vote on the motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. That's all councillors bar Councillor Burgess. Is that correct? Yep, thank you. No worries. Okay. It's that time again to advise that council is about to go into closed council. Thank you to those people who joined our gallery this evening and those of you who took the time to watch the meeting online this evening. The next meeting of ordinary meeting... No, that's not correct. We have a special meeting, don't we? But do we have to... Yeah? Just talking about that. Okay. The next meeting of ordinary meeting of council is on Wednesday the 28th of June. Thank you.
And maybe some fresh air, because I saw you yawning.
We will, as soon as you leave.
The recommendation 19.022/23 is that the meeting now be closed to the public at 9:34. Pursuant to Regulation 15 of the Meeting Procedures Regulations to discuss the following matters. Confirmation of closed minutes, notice of motion, general reports, elections and scholarships. I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Oh, sorry. Jessup and Thorpe. You don't need, no. All those in favour? That's all councillors. In accordance with Huon Valley's audio recording of council meetings, policy recording of the open session of the meeting ceases at 9:35. And I adjourn the meeting for a short break at